There's a difference between peace and liberation, is there not? You can have injustice and have peace. Isn't that correct?
And peace and be enslaved.
Yes.
So peace isn't the answer.
No.
Liberation is the answer. Liberation.
News.
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
What's up? It's Wednesday. It's another episode of Eye in the News. We're here. We're back. We did it. It's Collin. Everyone knows Collin's here. Says our names. Y'all can read. What's up, fam? How's everyone doing? Collin, how are you doing? You doing all right, right?
I'm back at work, so I'm sad.
Yeah.
Summer break is over. It went by so fast, but I had a good summer break, I guess.
Now you get to deal with the police state that is DC, so that's fun.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. But that's the reality of my life right now. But it's what can you do? It's try the best you can and hope that in my case I don't get abducted by ICE, given my personal institution. So I think that being said, we got quite a bit to cover. So shall we talk about what we're gonna share out tonight? So later on tonight, because we kind of have a exclusive story that we're going to do first. This is kind of a continuation of what I shared last week in terms of Colombia giving reparations to the Jewish staff in regards to anti-Semitism that they experienced on campus, allegedly. So, and I mentioned that we will talk about this article. So that's what I'm going to share tonight. But I think just getting into the weeds a little bit as to, why are U.S. universities so basically indebted to Israel, it seems, especially like the Ivy League schools. So we pulled out this article a few weeks ago. So I think in light of what we discussed last week, I think this will be a good tie-in. So I kind of wanted to share that tonight. And then later on tonight, we know this lady. We've talked about her. She is Judge Julia Sebutinde. Those of you who don't know, she voted against. She was the only vote in the ICJ for basically for Israel committing a plausible genocide. So she's back in the news in terms of now she's saying that Uganda has essentially disowned her for being pro-Israel, which don't believe that.
Yeah.
I have opinions on that. So we'll talk about it later. And it's going to bring up what we said and what was reported on by the Gray Zone, I think over a year ago. I think almost a year ago at this point. So we'll get into that much later on tonight. And then what did you bring, Reef?
Well, I brought something that I didn't see anyone else talk about. I saw a few people bring it up on Twitter, but 972 Mag put out this thing about essentially one of the Hasbara divisions in Israel So, an entire group of people actively trying to discredit journalists as terrorists, and among many things. So we're going to get into a bit of that. And then I brought some stories about just how Israel has used hunger as a weapon since way before October 7th. One of those, we're gonna do another history lesson. So that's what I brought. So
Yeah.
Well,
so as we say every week, we appreciate you guys for being here. I'm sure some of you will join us later. So definitely check out the stream if you're coming in later, or if you this part won't be in clips. So, but regardless, YouTube hates us because we talk about things that are not favorable to them for advertisers. So not as if we were going to get much money from YouTube anyways. So the way we can able to keep the lights on, and we actually do have a fundraising deal that we want to kind of mention to you all. We'll talk about that in a second. But in generally speaking, if you want to donate, those of you who are new, welcome. We're glad you're here. You can scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can type in the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of the screen there. Or if you happen to be on YouTube and you're in the chat and you forgot the Ko-fi link, you can type in !donate, all one word. The Ko-fi link will pop up, and then you can click right on it and donate from there. Anything as small as $1 will be helpful to us. And I think right now, we'll talk about this more formally, but we want to actually, good news from what Indy shared with me, we've actually raised enough money so far this year to be able to have all of our debts paid through the end of the year. So that's great. And we can only thank you guys for that. So thank you very much. That's a huge thing for us. So we're going to be doing pretty well, I think, in terms of, I want to say profit, but that being said, any extra money that we do get from now, we're probably going to give to Angel to help him purchase a new computer. So for those of you who know, Angel is our colleague in the network, Angel in the Afternoon, as well as wrestling that he does on the Ocho channel. So if you do have the means to give, and as I say every week, and look, tariffs are a thing. They're more or less beginning to be a thing, and will continue to be a thing probably through the next year as a lot of these tariff prices will come into effect. Take care of your families, take care of your communities, take care of yourselves first financially. That being said, if you have the means to give us any extra money so we can support Angel getting his computer, I think he has half, so we want to give him the other half so that also, especially with the tariffs, I'm sure it's going to be much more of a high cost for a computer, and that will be. So any extra money you do have, if you want to give, we more than appreciate it. If you do not want to give on Ko-fi, you can give on Substack, especially if you want to make it a monthly deal, or PayPal, Cash App. All the links are in the description below. And as always, we want to say thank you to our donors, who, especially those who give all the time. We love you guys. You are our MVPs. And anyone who kind of gives generously, your name will be featured in the closing credits. So that goes for anybody. So, but yeah, thank you guys so much. Actually, thank you guys so much for keeping us in the black. I think this is the first time since we started that we are projected to end the year in the black on the network. So so you guys have been giving generously. We are more than appreciative of that, and we thank you for that. So let's continue that so we can get Angel his computer, and so he's able to continue to create the content that he's doing. So, but thank you guys so much. We love you guys.
Yeah. All right. You ready for verse 1?
Yeah. So this first story is more of a reaction. if anything else. So as you guys know, and we talked about this story last week as a featured segment. So Trump has federalized DC police. He's brought in the National Guard to essentially roam the streets. ICE agents have picked up their activity in the city. So that's what, as a DC resident, I've had to deal with now for over a week now. So I want a lot of you, if you follow us on Twitter, kind of know what happened to me yesterday, or what I literally walked into yesterday. But I do want to kind of give a little bit of an update in terms of how people are feeling in regards to the federalization of DC police. So we're going to watch this NBC News clip, just kind of giving a little more context for those of you who may not know, and we'll get into the meat of the segment. So go ahead, Reef, when you're ready.
I'm not ready.
Turning now to President Trump's push to stop violent crime in the district. Over the coming days, the number of National Guard troops patrolling the city will more than double after several states committed to the federal takeover of D.C. But it seems most D.C. residents are opposed to the president's actions to tackle crime. News 4's Megan McGrath has that story.
National Guard troops on the Mall, around the monuments, and in metro stations. The federal takeover of the D.C. Police Department and the order to put federal law enforcement officers on patrol. According to a new Washington Post Schar School survey, the vast majority of D.C. residents are opposed. According to the survey, 8 out of 10 Washingtonians are against the executive order to federalize law enforcement, with 7 out of 10 opposing it strongly. And 65% of residents questioned don't think the president's actions will reduce crime in the city.
The abundance of cops doesn't do anything. We don't feel any safer because there's police on the streets. We feel safer when we come together as community and we can take on and tackle the challenges that our communities are facing together.
DC is a beautiful, vibrant city. People are scared to go out in the streets now. What makes DC unsafe is all of these police forces that are brutalizing people as they go about their day.
Do you think any of this is going to make a difference in terms of crime?
No, because you all here now. Do you see any shooting and robbery? I mean, crime gonna happen anyway.
As for what is the biggest problem facing the District of Columbia, the survey says 24% of residents cited President Trump, the takeover of the police department, or federal overreach as the biggest problem. 22% said it's crime.
I don't know. It's a little bit of a mix. I think crime is a real problem here. I was randomly assaulted on the Anacostia metro station by a guy who just swung a bottle at my face. Just definitely a problem. But again, the solutions are pretty complicated.
What he's doing is unethical, okay? He don't know the rules of law.
Desperate times call for desperate measures, so I feel like, it could be of some use, but I feel like we have enough policing.
And according to the survey, Washingtonians are generally happy about living in the city. 9 out of 10 say that their neighborhood is either an excellent or a good place to live. Megan McGrath, News 4.
I felt that last statement was a little bit of an overreach there, but so this is kind of an exclusive for you guys. So yesterday, I got home from work. I changed my clothes. I was walking to my gym, minding my own business, when I ran into what would have been a raid, an ICE raid. My guess is, so I'm not going to tell you where I live, but if those of you who know DC very well, based on the footage, you could probably guess where in the area I live in, Northwest DC, you could probably guess where I live. So what happened was, and I can't really tell from where I was walking as I was walking to the gym, but it looked like these ICE agents were trying to abduct, I guess, an employee, because I live by a Chick-fil-A and a Taco Bell. Actually, it's in the building where my gym is. So for what I could see, they were walking out of either one of those two restaurants, and then there was a huge crowd basically telling these guys to get the fuck out. So this was the footage that I was able to catch. So there are 3 clips. So this is what happened just as I was heading to the gym yesterday evening. So go ahead. Not sure what that guy was doing running there. But...
Take that mask off. Look at that monkey shot, boy. You need like 2 sides bigger pants. 2 sides bigger pants. Look at that. Baby coming through. Baby coming through.
That's the funniest bit. Baby, come through. Get your fucking asses out of my way.
You look like you got all that shit off of him. You have an obligation to refuse unlawful orders.
Ice go home!
Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home!
Ice go home!
Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home! Ice go home!
So that happened. So that continued to happen. And we basically followed them down the street where they parked their vehicles. So they stood there for a while, and then I guess they figured, okay, there's not much that we can do here. So they started walking away. So we kind of followed them, harassing them to ensure that they would leave. So this is the next clip here.
Get the fuck out of here, man.
I can't hear.
You can't hear. That's because I was trying to be fancy.
Take it off! Take it off! Coward! You are a coward!
Boo this man.
Boo this man!
Go back, fascists!
You can fucking get stopped though. I know you can't leave. I know you too fucking dumb. Come back! You just as bad as the rest of them, bro. You do your job, I'll do mine.
Take the mask off! Take the mask off!
Oh yeah, good boy, yeah brother, yeah. Oh, give him the fucking card. Give him the
marked white van. Well,
yeah, so they did eventually drive away. I don't think you need to play the last clip because it's very short, but they eventually did drive away. But so yeah, that's
sorry.
That's okay. But yeah, that's kind of what I ran into yesterday. Now the thing is, because I should have recorded this, but I was speaking to another resident yesterday, and apparently, like ICE has been, again, not trying to tell you where I live, but ICE has been kind of swarming in my neighborhood and the neighborhoods immediately right next to me, because my neighborhoods have a large Latino population, so I'm sure that has
part of
a
it.
lot to do with why ICE is centralizing around my neighborhood and neighborhoods near me in particular, as well as in other areas like in downtown. So, and apparently yesterday, I think there were about 8 arrests that ICE made in my neighborhood alone, or something like that. But it's been pretty scary in a way. And I think I shared this on Twitter, the idea for me, like as a person of color, but then like as a naturalized immigrant, like naturalized citizen, sorry, not necessarily feeling very safe. Now, granted, I can't live life scared. I'm going to continue living my life as I should. But the fact, again, like I literally walked into this last night, just minding my own business, getting my workout, and then I literally walked into a potential ICE raid that went wrong. Shout out to
Right.
the DC residents that actually did what they needed to do and actually chased them away. But yeah, that's my reality right now. And I've spoken to a few of my friends, funny enough, who are also Latino, who live outside of DC, even in Maryland or Virginia, and they're like, we're not coming in the city at all until further notice, because they do not want to possibly get stopped by ICE, especially given the checkpoints that were once again within the vicinity of my neighborhood last week. That they do not want the possibility of getting stopped or getting in any sort of trouble with ICE or with MPD here or any police at all. So this is the reality that Trump is putting us through. But I spoke to a friend who lives in New Jersey, who used to live in DC because I did post this on my Instagram account privately, and he was like, well, I don't think he was saying me, but he was saying like basically the alternative would have been better. And I'm like, while what we're seeing now, would this have happened under the Democrats? Probably not to this degree, but there's still the idea that the Democrats have funded the police state and have funded ICE way more. Like,
it probably would have happened just slightly differently. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it would be right. It wouldn't be as crazy as well and kind of over the top as what we're seeing now, but it was still going to happen.
It would have been covertly.
But as I was telling my friend, it's like, right. As I was telling my friend, ICE should not be a thing. And the fact that Democrats have not necessarily pushed towards the dismantling of ICE and have funded ICE / the police state, like, I'm not sure if they've done it any more than Republicans, but they've funded ICE for sure. So, as I keep saying, Democrats cultivate the very world that we're living in now. It's not like they are pushing against this. And I think they feel like, oh, if we push back against this, then the Republicans will say shit about us in terms of, oh, we don't care about security and all that kind of bullshit. Well, fuck yeah. Like, but I think the idea that like this is okay is really, it's not. But again, it's just the idea of like, it just seems very sporadic to me. It seems very targeted, especially among the Latino population in particular. This seems to be like how it's affecting them. And I'm saying this as a teacher, school starts for us next week. And the idea that we're going to have a lot of families who will be terrified of walking their kids or they themselves going anywhere. I'm even hearing now within the last week, because of the federalization of the police, that restaurant patronage is down because no one, well, I would argue it's down anyway because people don't necessarily have the money to afford going out to eat, but they don't want to possibly get caught up by ICE. Or if you are an employee and you happen to be a person of color, you don't want to be in a situation where this can happen to you. Like I said, this happened, I guess, outside of a Taco Bell or Chick-fil-A, depending on which building they entered in. I couldn't tell from where I was walking from. But yeah, it's nuts. And as I said, I can't say that I feel comfortable with this at all. Like, even I am kind of wondering, like, what will happen to me? You know, because I'm alone, I live by myself, I'm a Black man. Like, if I get abducted by ICE, no one's going to necessarily know what will happen to me. So I do have some stuff that I have done to kind of protect myself, or at least have people kind of be aware of my whereabouts at all times. Like one of my close friends, I've tagged my location on my phone to him. So like, you can kind of watch and see like where I go. But man, it's crazy out here. But as I said, this was just a random Tuesday for me.
Yep. So, and how long have you lived in DC?
Like 8 years now.
And like, ain't had it like this at all before. So,
well, I'll say this. I mean, obviously, given like, you know, I remember I attended the George Floyd protests 5 years ago. Like, the thing was, everything was more concentrated around the White House downtown. So, and obviously, given like Gaza protests, again, concentrated downtown, more or less. This is the first time in, as far as I'm aware of, living in DC, where essentially the police state has kind of swarmed into other neighborhoods. Actually, that's not true. There was definitely a police presence during George Floyd, but not like this. Like, not to the degree of where people are kind of living in fear and trepidation regards to the possibility of being abducted by ICE or being arrested by MPD or whatever. So yeah, this is definitely like overkill, but there have been situations even among Democrats that this is kind of similar things that happen, although, as I said, not as crazy. But even our mayor, though, has weaponized the police politically, you know, in terms of the homeless. She has, you know, put up barriers where tent cities are, you know, when they get complaints that she's done that. So it's on both sides. But as we said, it's just a little more, a little less, it's more sneaky with the Democrats versus the overt situation that we're seeing right now under Trump.
Right. Yep. Sounds about right. Well, we'll see what happens in DC as things move forward. Like it just feels like there's some other reason that's happening, you know? It seems weird and distractionary and like
clearly it's a distraction. Like we mentioned, I think it was last week, where we believe that this is partially a distraction from people not think, and I think it's worked because no one is talking about the Epstein files in the same way as they were about a few weeks ago. No one's talking about that anymore. So, you know, I guess it worked. But you know, but again, you're right. It's distractionary. It's over the top. It's an abuse of power. But both parties benefit. Like, granted, if this were Democrats, it wouldn't be quite like this, but this would happen under the Democrats too. You just wouldn't hear about it as loud in the media. So, but again, this is and going back to what some of the residents were saying in the clip. They were saying, you know, a couple of them were kind of seemingly in favor of what's happening because, you know, they're saying like crime is getting bad and all this kind of stuff. So you got to do what you got to do. But again, you know, crime is linked to poverty. So if you're dealing with crime with more cops, that's not the way to do it. If Republicans really wanted to deal with crime, raise the minimum wage, perhaps, like get off this tariff bullshit so that people are somewhat able to afford, you know, basic needs. Like, again, I'm not sure what people are going to do. Like, we're heading into the holiday season, hell, within the next month. Like, there's going to be like holiday products being
I was reading
on the
somewhere
shelves pretty soon.
that like partially the thing about the tariffs is to cover up like a shitty economy we already have. You know what I mean? Like if we put these tariffs in place, they don't really do that much to the end result, right? Like that's just a byproduct of like the economy being terrible. That makes sense. Like,
sure.
It's just like we've been in a recession, and it's like you have to invent ways to actually show that it's. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird thing with that too, you know. But like, economy was fucking dog shit already, you know.
Right.
People couldn't afford anything, so
right. Yeah, but it's only going to get worse now. And I think it's people are going to really feel the pinch of it within the next few months to a year. And so as I said, like I said earlier, you know, watch your coins. If you're able to buy stuff in bulk beforehand, I mentioned this probably back in the spring, do that now because, you know, we don't know how high, and they're starting already. Like, as I said, that if Walmart is like doing dynamic pricing, which I'm hearing about, like we're in trouble. Like, because Walmart is probably one of the cheapest places you're able to get basic things. So if that's happening at a Walmart, I don't know what's going to happen in other places as well. So, but yeah, be careful out there and watch your coins. And
speaking of coins, we might need some over here at Indie News Network, seeing as that YouTube has demonetized us as it has a while ago. But you could scan that QR code. Links are in the description for other ways to support, or you know, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. But otherwise, you know, do all the stuff everyone else asks you to do: like and subscribe, share videos, leave a comment, let us know what you think. Do you think the police state's coming to your neck of the woods? But otherwise, thanks for watching.
Yeah. Well, I think just even with the National Guard, I forgot to say this in the segment, but they're coming from out of state. Many of them are coming in from out of state. Like, actually, fun fact, I didn't check it to verify, but one of the ICE agents' cars, I heard someone yell, like, that's from New Jersey.
Right.
So, so Trump is literally gathering the police state in different states to make an example of us in DC, which I think is nuts. So, but anyway, let's get to.
But yeah, that whole tariff thing is just so weird. Like it's like an easy thing for people to blame. It's like we need something for people to blame the economy on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh well, let's just make some tariffs real quick, so that people can blame that and not 1,000 other things. But
right. So let's see. So in chat, Desert Mantis said ACAB, absolutely, all day long. Also said nice work, DC, with the fist emojis. Desert Mantis asked, did you capture this video? And I answered him in chat, but yes, I did. What you saw in that video was from my iPhone.
Bunch of people
Desert
talking
Mantis
about
again.
the
Donnie.
Venezuela stuff, I see.
What is going on with that? I actually do not know.
Something about
what is going on
me
with
and
that.
me and Indy covered a precursor to that Sunday night about like U.S. military, Navy, and whatever, like going down to South America / Caribbean area to like, essentially try to scare the Venezuelans, And Venezuelans are like, nah, fuck you. We'll stand on business. Literally, I saw people chanting like, we'll be your Latin American Vietnam. Like, okay. But not much else I've seen other than that. But I'll definitely keep an eye out for it. So we'll see.
So back in the chat, Desert Mantis again said, Donnie Tiny Hands ain't going to be happy when he hears about this. Honestly, I don't think he cares that much.
Yeah.
I think just the chaos is all he wants. So I think if anything, he enjoys it.
Yeah, he wants people talking about it.
Right. Just so they're not talking about other shit.
Yeah.
Fred Edwards said, boil the ice. He also asked, is that the neighborhood where the moped driver was crashed into by unmarked ICE vehicles? I don't know. That's the first I've heard of
about that one.
I can look that up and see. Actually, I might just do that.
Cool.
And you can read the rest.
Well, we've got
if there is any more.
Max RJ, now we will get the war in Venezuela. I think that's also has to do with this Maduro stuff recently as well. About some vote poll, whatever, that like they weren't polling the indigenous people anyway. So, I mean, I might be getting all my South America stuff mixed up, but that is one of the possibilities. So, Max RJ, we could buy California olive oil here. I think it's a little bit cheaper. Yeah, not much, is it? Manta says he buys Palestinian olive oil. Not sure how you're getting that right now. You might check to see who's bottling that. But yeah. Kieran Pine, Mr. Dumb and his miniature thumb. I think you read that one, right? Spoil for oil. Let's go Monroe. Yeah, no, that Venezuela thing is going to be interesting, I'm betting. But
so just checking. So the answer, Fred Edward, no, it wasn't in the my direct neighborhood, but south of me.
Okay.
So not far from me. Basically where that checkpoint that and you see, I think that kind of went viral, like where sandwich guy threw
Yeah.
So the sandwich, and he lost his job and got arrested. And
Waste of a
charged.
hoagie.
So that area is just like literally like 2 or 3 blocks south from there, which is not my neighborhood directly, but I live in the vicinity of. So yes.
Yeah. Manta says it's to get those Venezuelan drug cartels. I did hear something about that, where that's part of it. So alleged cartel stuff. You know, it's everything's about crime. That's, you know, we're gonna be tough on crime wherever it's at. You know, we're gonna police the world again. It's gonna be great. So anyway, you ready for our next one? I'm ready.
Yep. Actually, just want to check something because I think I lost the connection for a second. So I just want to see if it will move. If you,
yeah, you got it.
Working?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, it dropped out.
Weird.
Just now. So I just want to make sure I was able to get back in. All right. So our first, well, not first, but our second story tonight. So like I said, last week we talked about how Columbia University is rich enough to give reparations to their Jewish staff in terms of the anti-Semitism that they experienced on campus, allegedly. Yeah. So, but we have seen just generally how, especially with the Ivy League schools, how they have kind of cartel to Israel, that they're doing basically a lot of stuff, you know, just, yeah, they're definitely being pro-Israel. So, so you might be wondering why that is the case. So Reef brought me this article like a couple weeks ago, and I think in light of the story that we did talk about regarding Colombia last week, I think, again, one, it's more of a continuation of that, but two, I think this will kind of give you guys some insight as to why U.S. universities are seemingly kind of doubling down on their relationship. Not all, but you can argue like many of the big universities that you know of, especially seemingly the Ivy Leagues, are kind of going, like, really doubling down on their support of Israel, even though they may not say that verbally. They are definitely in terms of, you know, not even just money, but resources. So, so you pulled up the story from Israel Palestine News. I guess it was also reported on in Plus 972.
Yeah. Which you got to be careful with 972 because they are Israeli, which that it can be a little like they're okay, but it's like sometimes you gotta, because I have one from 972 later tonight, and you'll see what I mean, where it's like, you know, they tend to have something in there that you can catch, you know, but
right,
like continue.
But well, we can kind of get into that
if there is
those in chat, you can kind of catch.
Sometimes it's just
I didn't think so.
Fear mongery, like I've seen from them. Where it's like they put out information just to scare the normal people who are paying attention, you know?
Sure.
But we'll see. You know, we've reported their stuff before. I don't think
it gives that, but as when I read it, but but we'll see. And let us know in your chat what you guys think. So this was written by Dika Taylor Scheinman and Georgia Gee. And they write, after crushing dissent, you know, given the protests that we've seen in relation to Gaza on college campuses this past year, U.S. universities are deepening ties with Israeli academia. Israeli universities regularly collaborate with the military, which has destroyed all academic life in Gaza. We know this. That's done nothing to slow U.S.-Israeli partnerships, which we also know and have reported extensively on that. So actually, can you zoom in, because that's a little small?
Yeah. How's that?
Okay, actually I have to come up. That's a little better. Thank you. At the end of July, Harvard signaled its willingness to spend as much as $500 million Let me say that again. $500 million. Billion dollars.
With a beat.
Jeez. To settle accusations of anti-Semitism brought by the Trump administration. While the scandal and the staggering sum has drawn widespread attention, a previous concession slipped under the radar. In a failed bid to placate the administration earlier this year, Harvard agreed to establish a formal partnership with an Israeli university. On July 28th, Harvard announced 2 new initiatives with Israeli institutions: a study abroad program with Ben-Gurion University in the Negev, and a postdoctoral fellowship for Israel scientists at Harvard Medical School. The move comes amid a wave of universities launching or expanding partnerships with their Israeli counterparts in recent months. In December, MIT launched a program that will allow scholars at Israel's 9 public, state-accredited universities to come to MIT for collaboration and training. In March, Clemson University in South Carolina announced a partnership with Hebrew University and Spahir College to bring new agricultural technologies to Israel's greater Negev region, and Columbia University committed to expanding its academic initiatives with Tel Aviv University. And in May, the University of Utah signed an academic cooperation deal with Ariel University, an Israeli institution located in the illegal West Bank settlement. So I have something to say right here. It seems that a lot of these partnerships are tied to the greater Israel plan, so to speak. You know, you need to have people to be able to, like, agriculture, tech. You're going to need people who are able to be experts in those fields, especially if you're looking to wipe out,
right,
like Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, you know, essentially clean house in the region, and then kind of cultivate it into their, I'll say, their paradise, so to speak. So you're going to need the tech and the know-how in order to do that. So that's kind of where I kind of feel this is kind of leading to, and why these partnerships are very important. So this is essentially kind of,
we've covered places like King's College, and you know, if you go back to our we covered an Alan McLeod thing about, you know, London schools being essentially just you know, they funnel, it's like two-way street. Not only do they go and get military adjuncts to come in and teach curriculum, right? They then start pulling all these kids up through the, you know, Langley ladder to intelligence and military and because it's like they need both. They need you brainwashed, but then they also need that brainwashed brain to do stuff for them. So,
right,
you know, but which we've covered that here. We've covered them, you know, they go straight to universities here and recruit. Very, very commonplace for them to try and get, you know, bodies. So,
right.
But, yeah.
Let's continue. But yeah, just wanted to say that because I made that, I think it's very easy to kind of make that connection, and in terms of what we've discussed before. You can actually zoom out a little bit. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Meanwhile, Harvard recently suspended its research partnership with Rizet, I guess how you say it, University, the largest Palestinian university in the West Bank. And in Gaza, all 12 universities have been destroyed by Israel's genocide on the Strip. We call it scholasticide, said Dr. Wessam Amir, formerly the Dean of the Faculty of Communications and Languages at Gaza University. It refers to Israel's systematic and deliberate destruction of education as a tool of domination. As U.S. universities deepen ties with Israel's institutions, a new comprehensive Hebrew language report by New Profile, an Israeli anti-militarization project movement, sheds light on the extent to which those institutions are embedded in the country's military apparatus, with Israel expanding its assault on Gaza and spiraling settler and army violence throughout the West Bank. The report identifies that at least 57 military academic programs for active duty soldiers and conscription candidates across numerous universities, and estimates that financial cooperation between the Ministry of Defense and academia for soldier study programs from 2019 to 2022 exceeded, I'm not sure of the currency there, but roughly $79 million.
Would be shekels.
So essentially, this is. I don't think that's shekels. If you know that currency, let us know in the chat. But it, as I said, it correlates to roughly $80 million. So basically, so
the new
IDF
Israeli
soldiers,
shekel. That is what it is.
Oh, it is? Okay. So basically, IDF soldiers, mind you, are able to get educated on essentially our dime, because that's where a lot of this money is coming from. But we cannot offer higher education here.
No.
For our students here.
No, they got to earn their bootstraps to pull themselves up by. You know?
Well, except they are wearing the bootstraps and they're killing people. So,
yep. Similar to how you can only get that here if you go through the military. Then you get you free college, right? You know?
Well, yeah, that's what happens here too. But it's like, but that's kind of the focus, is that you have to work in the military in order to get some type of perk. And that shouldn't necessarily, I mean, I get it, but that shouldn't be the only industry.
If you want productive members of society, you might give that to everyone. Not the ones you traumatize in war. But
right. So anyway, let's continue. The 7 Israeli universities named in the report, including Hebrew University and Tel Aviv University, are active partners in the ongoing occupation of the West Bank and Israel's genocide. Nisi Palil, the report's author, told Plus 972. Academia in the United States should set some basic moral standards as a condition for interinstitutional partnerships. At the very least, this should include requiring Israeli academic institutions to end their cooperation with Israel's military establishment and industry. Israeli universities have long enjoyed a reputation in the West as multicultural, pluralistic institutions with robust academic freedom. As Maya Wind, a scholar of Israeli militarism and the author of the 2024 book, can you zoom in? It's hard to see that.
Yeah.
Towers of Ivory and Steel notes, this view has been echoed by groups like Freedom House and the Varieties of Democracy Institute, as well as universities themselves. Columbia University describes campus life at Tel Aviv University, with whom it offers a dual degree program, as dynamic and pluralistic. Yet, according to Wind, the reality is much more troubling. Israeli universities are in fact deeply implicated with Israeli settler colonialism and now in genocide, she told Plus 972. This Western consensus is one Palestinians have long questioned. Indeed, the Palestinian Campaign for the Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel issued its call to boycott Israeli universities back in 2004, a full year before the BDS movement was launched. The campaign advanced the claim that Israeli academic institutions and the majority of Israeli intellectuals have either contributed directly to sustaining Israel's systems of oppression or being complicit through their silence. And again, it's not just Israel that's done this. We have done this here. Harvard in particular, and we reported about this maybe about 2 years ago, how they, they essentially made eugenics a thing in terms of the oppression that Black people, and especially, have experienced here. So this is kind of the danger of, and I know you agree with this, with academia, is that overtly academia influences policy in terms of our government. So you've seen this with Israel, but we also have done that in terms of academia, and you're seeing this more directly in terms of now, You're not allowed to talk about Palestine. A lot more of these Israeli groups are being more prolific now. If anything, they're expanding more, to try to, and it will talk about it in the article later, to kind of bring the Hasbara, or at least the pro-Israeli sentiment, towards U.S. universities. And U.S. universities are not necessarily pushing back on that. If they are, not so well, but generally, they're not. So this is what makes it very dangerous in terms of trying to increase pro-Israeli sentiment, which not sure if it's working or not sure if it's going to work, but the effort is definitely being made by the Israeli government with the help of our educational systems here in the US. But anyway, Wynn's book, based on extensive archival and ethnographic research in Israel, only bolsters AICBI's assessment of Israeli academia. Entire academic disciplines, she argues, subordinate their knowledge production to the needs of an Israeli state. One example is I'm going to mispronounce
Havatsalat.
Havatsalat program, housed in Hebrew University's Department of Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies, which integrates academic study with military intelligence training. Many of its graduates go on to serve in Unit 8200, Israel's elite surveillance corps. This information they collect is often used to prosecute Palestinians in military courts or coerce collaboration with the Shin Bet, Israel's internal security agency. Middle Eastern studies is hardly the only field where academic expertise is mobilized in service of Israeli state interests, particularly its military campaigns. Israeli universities have also helped construct legal frameworks that reinterpret international humanitarian law to shield the state from accountability. Probably, again, what we're seeing with the ICJ right now. And we'll probably get more into that, more especially with the segment I will talk about later. Probably not directly, but you can see some of that kind of placed in a more religious way, so to speak. At Tel Aviv's University Institute for National Security Studies, academics work closely with security officers to produce legal justifications for Israeli military operations, including arguments that traditional laws of war are ill-suited for Israel's war on terror. One such innovation is the term third population, referring to individuals who appear to be civilians but might interfere with military objectives, a category used to erode in legal distinction between combatant and non-combatant, effectively permitting the targeting of Palestinian civilians. There's going to be years of research to understand how the Israeli society carried out a genocide and got away with it for as long as it did, Wynn said. To understand how we got to this point, it's not enough to look at the military. You have to look at the kinds of institutions that we don't tend to look at when we think of state and colonial violence. No institution in Israel is untouched by the occupation, and Israeli universities are no exception. Among Israel's 9 state-recognized universities, one stands out for its egregiously blatant violations of international law. One of the first Israeli academic institutions in the occupied West Bank, Ariel University was established in 1982 as the Judea and Samaria Academic College, an outpost of Bar Ilan University. The university is located in the settlement of Ariel, which itself was founded just 4 years earlier, envisioned by its planners as a secular urban hub in the heart of the West Bank, close to the Israeli military industries where many of its residents worked. Ariel University is not just built on occupied Palestinian land, with an explicit mission to instill a sense of belonging to the state of Israel and advance Zionist values, according to its president. The institution has also given academic credit to students who volunteer with Hashomer Yosh, a former U.S.-sanctioned volunteer youth organization whose settler members have committed violence against Palestinian communities in the West Bank. I call on everyone to support them, like we do here at Ariel University, said Mark Zell, an American lawyer and board chairman at Ariel, in a 2020 video to promote the youth group. A spokesperson from Ariel University said it has no relationship with Hashomer Yosh, and statements made by private individuals do not represent official U.S. university policy. Yeah, right. At least 8 U.S. universities, including Johns Hopkins, and Florida Atlantic University, have established relationships with Ariel. In 2019, according to its nonprofit financial disclosures, Barnard College donated $13,500 directly to Ariel University for a scientific project. And in June, Ariel and the University of Utah signed a 5-year memorandum of understanding that establishes a framework of joint research projects, student and faculty exchanges, and shared academic conferences. Its announcement, first reported by the Jerusalem Post, came as a shock to some of Utah's faculty. Marshall Steinbaum, assistant professor of economics, told Plus 972 that they learned about the partnership from the article. There was no word of it on campus at all, Steinbaum said. They think people won't get organized because it's the summer, but we will not just stop agitating for the cancellation of the MOU. Sneaky.
Yeah.
In a press release published after the announcement, the University of Utah Faculty for Justice in Palestine, in which Steinbaum is a member, noted that any academic cooperation between the universities would be a violation of Utah state and U.S. federal laws, which prohibit higher education institutions from taking positions on matters of public controversy or discriminating on the basis of religion or national origin. Because Israel and the settlement of Ariel prohibit both Palestinians and many Muslims from entry, the press release noted, any academic cooperation undertaken with Ariel University is, by definition, unavailable to the University of Utah's many Muslim and Palestinian students, faculty, and academic personnel. The faculty also highlighted the shameful timing of the agreement. Every single university in Gaza, among which University of Utah graduates were employed, has already been destroyed in that genocide, the group said. Those institutions are the ones that could truly benefit from such a partnership with the university. In response to the questions about the MOU, Rebecca Walsh, Director of Communications at the University of Utah, told Plus 972 that this decision does not represent the University of Utah taking a position on the war in Gaza or the occupied Palestinian territories more broadly. It's worth noting that the university, as a state institution, is not allowed to take political positions. I argue if you are having partnerships with Israeli university in the midst of a genocide, that is a political position. You're basically saying, I don't give a shit. That's what you're saying. Whether or not you think it's political, well, not even if it's a political thing, but morally, what does that say? Like, you're willing to form a partnership with the very state that's currently killing Palestinians. And they'll get into this later, but it's one thing if you have partnerships with both. That would be one thing. But you can't have partnerships with both, given that all universities in Gaza have been destroyed.
Yeah.
So, I would argue maybe not political, although I think it is, but moral, and I think, more especially ethical. Like, what are you doing? So that's just bullshit statement that Miss Walsh made regarding that. So, but it's definitely a bias. So, but anyway, Walsh sent a link to the University of Utah's global inventory of academic activity related to Palestine, which only included a small number of faculty publications, no official partnerships, and a handful of enrolled students from Palestine in recent years. Mark Lewis, Ariel spokesperson, told Plus 972 that the MOU with Utah is strictly academic, sure, and that the university has several partnerships with universities in the United States, as if that's a good thing. But anyway, In December, MIT announced the inauguration of its Collin if I said that wrong, sorry, programs for visiting Israeli scholars, an academic partnership with Israel's 9 state-recognized universities, which aims to empower Israeli scholars to get involved in collaborative, cutting-edge research, deepen academic ties, and showcase the brilliance of the startup nation. Since launching at MIT, Collin campus presence has grown. It now counts chapters at Dartmouth University, UPenn, Harvard Medical School, and Columbia. The list of Israeli partnership universities include Ariel, as well as Hebrew University and Ben Gurion University, which cooperate with the Defense Ministry to allow more soldiers in regular service and military personnel in other positions to pursue their academic studies than any other institution of higher learning, according to New Profiles report. The Defense Ministry pays over NIS 32 million, which is 9 million in US dollars, to Hebrew University, for example, to host the Talbiot program, a military academic program that trains soldiers for research and development roles in weapons manufacturing. Ben Gurion University, on the other hand, with whom Harvard now partners, offers an accelerated undergraduate program for fighter pilots that involves close and deep cooperation between the university and the flight school. So, yeah, it's just so funny. Like, all of these things that are being promoted is dealing with surveillance, tech,
And yeah.
and military.
Yep.
Mostly. Like, we only heard one thing regarding agriculture, but even that is kind of questionable considering the Great Israel Project. So this is kind of like, yeah, this is essentially the draft Israeli version. That's what this gives.
Right.
You know, it's forcing, and again, keep in mind, I've said this many times, I think the average age for soldiers in the IDF is about 19, 20 years old. These are kids. So especially like if they don't have many options that they want to go to school, it's kind of similar here. If you're low income, you know, the idea of going into the military might be an option for you. But so it kind of gives the idea of like, because even us, we've kind of talked about how we subsidize Israel's education, but in what way? It seems like this is one of the main, if not really the only ways. I can't say that for sure, but it's giving the illusion that it is, that the only things that that they're able to offer students if they want to make themselves viable or have a job is if you're working in surveillance or tech or in the military. And then you can use that, and they can use that to their advantage in terms of completing the Greater Israel Project. You know, so it's sad in a sense if that's the case, because you know, you're essentially forcing the conditions for Israeli students to consider going into these fields without the consideration morally of what this can morally, the implication of this morally in terms of you're committing a genocide. So it's just really, I think, really wicked that the government is basically almost, I would argue, almost forcing Israeli children and youth to go into these fields for their, you know, for ultimately the destruction of Palestinians. So, and we in this in academia are kind of liable for that too. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it just seems like similar to, like I said earlier, with all these universities, like, you know, you got to realize how they're making their money, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're getting it through research programs and granting and, you know, or like wealthy donors, right? Like those are your two, like, grants, donors, tuition, right? That's how universities are making this money. And the ways they're doing that are partnering with military contracts, right? You know, they're working with companies that work for, you know, that have their own military contracts, like Dow Chemical, and you can go through all that list. Like, this is where especially university science departments are getting a lot of their funding from, and or big pharma, and or the people who can afford to do this kind of research and development, right? So,
right,
it's makes sense that they're partnering with IDF programs and especially in that area, right? But
yeah, but yeah, it's essentially a pipeline for a pipeline for Israeli youth to go into these fields.
Yeah.
So again, as I said, it's basically the draft Israel version.
Well,
because
everyone's IDF over there, so they're all forced to serve at least a year.
Right?
Right?
And I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting to think about, because we haven't heard, and not to say this doesn't exist, I'm sure it is, but we're not hearing necessarily the incentives of education, or I don't know, like trying to think of another industry, like education or economics, which I'm sure exists, but I'm sure it definitely seems like a big pull, to go into these fields where they're able to perfectly execute, this plan eventually, and having enough essentially drones to do it. So, yeah, it's just kind of funny that, and I think especially for us, which kind of makes sense given our low-key colonialism capabilities, which people don't necessarily talk about, but we're low-key kind of promoting that idea instead of trying to, talk about issues or try to elevate people in terms of revolution, or radical change, or a turn away from the old in terms of the exploitation that we've done historically in the past, especially in the West. And I think that's kind of the danger, especially in these universities, because we kind of talk about it, or at least in those settings, we kind of seemingly educate students to kind of think in those terms. But at the same time, if students are talking about it in those terms, they're almost penalized for it. Case in point, what you're seeing with the protests.
Well, and stuff at Columbia, and
right. So you're penalized for it, which ironically is the very place where you should be able to hear a lot of these more revolutionary ideas, and having college students, university students making a stand against the empire. That's traditionally where a lot of the protests do start, is on university campuses, when they're exposed to different ideas and are able to kind of shape the world in terms of those ideas. So, but we talked about how Reagan kind of put his foot down on a lot of that, given the 60s and the civil rights movement and all that. So, but it's funny, but it's almost kind of like you can't speak, universities in the US can't speak to having a moral high ground on the issue when they are literally helping permeate the problem
right
in Israel. So, but anyway, let's continue that, but kind of going into what I was saying. But MIT's partnership, critics say, goes beyond military ties. Wynn argues that such initiatives are part of a broader strategy to use Israeli academia as a tool for Hasbara, or pro-Israel propaganda, to attempt to subjugate the Israeli narrative and reframe the facts of apartheid that are very obvious for all to see. The MIT program, for instance, aims to reflect and embrace Israel's diverse demographics in the selection of its participating scholars, whose presence on a U.S. campus will contribute to a better understanding of their country. As MIT strengthens its relationship with Hebrew University, Israel killed over 1,000 academics who once were associated with universities in Gaza, from presidents to deans, professors, and students. I'm in favor of academic collaborations in general, but when Palestinian society is being systematically attacked, Why not do the opposite? Said Richard Solomon, a doctoral student and member of the MIT Coalition for Palestine. Why not deepen relationships with the Palestinian community? In response to questions from Plus 972 on its academic collaborations, MIT referenced the Kalaniyot program's website and the launch of the Global MIT At-Risk Fellows Program Palestine in December 2024, a 2-year pilot initiative to bring 5 scholars from Palestine to MIT each semester for training and mentorship by MIT faculty member. Gee, and I wonder how many Israeli students are able to participate in the programs that MIT is offering, and a 2-year pilot at that. Like, so this is just a kind of like a liberal way of kind of both siding the problem.
Well, we gave them their crumbs, you know,
right?
Is what it sounds like to me. So,
right. The faculty leaders have expressed their support for hosting both programs, said Sarah McDonald. I'm sure a lot of them were pro-Israeli faculty. But, because again, if I was faculty, I would be opposed to having Israel doing anything at all, especially if you're not doing anything to the same equity level as what you could do for Palestinians. Oh, go back. I'm not done with that. Paragraph. The faculty leaders have expressed their support for hosting both programs, said Sarah McDonald from the Institute Office of Communications in an email statement.
We hear you. We see you.
Move. There we go. Down the street from MIT, Harvard had come under increasing pressure from Republicans and Harvard's former president, Lawrence Summers, to end its partnership with Brissett over the student government's alleged ties to Hamas. Earlier this year, can you zoom in, please? After agreeing to establish a formal partnership with a unpacified Israeli university as part of its settlement of anti-Semitism lawsuits, gee, I wonder why it's unpacified. Harvard School of Public Health suspended its partnership with Brissett. The school often collaborated with scholars at Brissett and offered a summer course in Jordan focused on Palestinian health. This is an act of academic boycott of Palestinian universities, said Amir, who was forced to flee Gaza and is now a visiting researcher at Cambridge University. They are sending a message that they consider Palestinian students, academics, and institutions as disposable. Their lives are not equal. According to Wynn, the disparity between Israeli institutions' close ties with U.S. universities and the marginalization of Palestinian counterparts has had tangible consequences. The Israeli state has intentionally isolated Palestinian academics, she told Plus 972. It destroyed their universities, impoverished their resources, and attempted to prevent them from having exchanges with the rest of the international academic community. Less than a month into Israel's assault on Gaza, following the Hamas attacks on October 7th, students across U.S. campuses began mobilizing to protest Israel's aerial bombardment and demand divestment from companies tied to the occupation and Israel's military. So I hope all of that, of what I just read before, kind of makes sense, a little more sense now in terms to why college students were protesting, you know, like for colleges and universities to divest from Israel, which would include possibly cutting ties with their partnerships that they have with Israeli universities in terms of, you know, like their complicity in the genocide that's occurring. So now hopefully that gives you a little more broader picture of that. However, Israeli university presidents were quick to counter the effort, of course. The heads of all 9 state-recognized Israeli universities sent a joint message to their U.S. counterparts expressing concern that college campuses had become, quote-unquote, breeding grounds for anti-Israel and anti-Semitic sentiments, which they attributed to a naive and biased understanding of the conflict. Sure. Scroll down.
Where? That's it.
Oh, that's it? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then, in April 2024, the same group of university had suggested in a separate letter to U.S. university presidents that extreme situations may require measures beyond the conventional tools available to university administrations, which could be read as an endorsement of deploying law enforcement against their own students. So again, this all happened under who?
Yep.
Not Trump.
Mm-hmm.
So between mid-April and mid-July 2024, more than 3,000 people were arrested or detained on U.S. campuses. Again, this happened under Biden, not Trump. Universities also disciplined students internally, banning groups like Students for Justice in Palestine, along with Jewish Voice for Peace, issuing suspensions and expulsions, withholding diplomas, and a spat of new rules and tightening restrictions on protests and speech. The repression is continuing as students prepare to return to campus for the fall semester, which is starting now in many schools. At the end of July, Columbia informed nearly 80 students that they face suspensions of up to 3 years or expulsion for their involvement in campus protests and encampments. But though such measures have created a chilling effect, they have not distinguished Jewish student calls for divestment, nor have they increased support for Israel on college campuses. Quite the opposite. An extensive report released by the Jewish People Policy Institute this month warns that the academic field of Israel studies is increasingly becoming a pariah field and on the brink of extinction. Good. The report notes that the Israel Institute, the primary organization funding short-term professorships and campus programming in Israel studies, has significantly scaled back its operations, apparently due to budget constraints. Meanwhile, the 2022 decision by the US-based Middle East Studies Association to boycott Israeli institutions effectively severed its ties with the Association for Israel Studies, whose members are largely affiliated with Israeli universities.
Yeah.
So some positive news, but I think just overall, like, this goes deep. And hopefully, as I said, this kind of gives a more broader picture for our audience and our family. And we've talked about this like in the past, but probably not in this way. But hopefully it gives you guys a better idea as to why college students were protesting in generally, especially what we given the information that we gave. This is why, because it's very unequitable that they're offering all this stuff to Israeli students of them coming here, or Israeli students being able to be offered, again, draft, I would argue, but kind of like what we do here in terms of offering perks for the military, offering some perks in terms of being associated with any military or surveillance, programs that will help accelerate the destruction of Palestinians. And given what you reported out in terms of their education, that makes a lot of sense in terms of, if they're propagandized into thinking this way, then of course they will want to go into the military to essentially have the opportunity to hurt Arabs. So but again, this is kind of promoted through education, which as a teacher, I'm kind of disgusted by, because this is not what education is supposed to elevate, not destroy. So the idea that they're using, again, these are children, these are children who are, doing these things and are making these decisions, but given I'll call it the education complex, or the Israeli education complex, with our support to help facilitate this. So really, this is not so much even in terms of the physical, in terms of like war and all that. This is a mental issue, because this is the kind of stuff that is being kind of force-fed onto Israeli students from young, which perpetuates into, and especially like, and we probably should look into like I'm sure there's some perks that they get in terms of being in the IDF. I'm fairly certain. But if that's favorable to a lot of students, but then, if it's not, and again, I don't know, and that's something that we could look at more as well. Like,
Right.
if there are any other perks for going into something like education or law, which I'm sure there is, especially if it kind of benefits Israel from what they're doing, then, it's not even so much the government that really we should have an issue with, but we've talked about this before. Education in so many ways can influence governmental policy. So we're seeing that here in the case of Israel, that this is led by academia, which is meant to be a place where you should be uplifting radical ideas, not colonialist ideas that are leading to the destruction of people. So that's my issue with all of this. But it's very interesting to think about it in terms of the back and forth in terms of academia here and in Israel, which hasn't been mentioned in media. So this is just another angle that I think is interesting to explore about why this is happening. Like, this is a matter of, again, as I said, the mind and how you're cultivating those minds towards the greater plan. And, essentially brainwashing. Yeah, that's what it is. Brainwashing children in order to get this done. And they don't know. And I don't want to say they don't know any better. But if you're kind of grown up in that environment and you have no other way, then it makes sense that you're going to have teenagers basically being like, oh, I want to be in the military, surveillance and all this kind of.
Right. Yeah,
Especially
someone
if they get
knows.
the opportunity possibly to come to the US to study. So,
Yeah.
but any other thoughts before we close?
No, not really. Just sounds about, par for the course for our universities. So, But anything else?
No, I think, I got mad at you for, in a sense, because this is basically going to be like a F Israel stream. But so I guess we'll add it to the playlist, I guess. But you can watch all of our clips. And we don't talk about Israel all the time, although I feel we do a lot. We have other segments and streams that you can go back and watch, which actually a lot of you are doing, by the way. So thank you so much for that. You're going back in the archives and watching old clips. But in order to see those clips and our old streams, that we don't have to depend on YouTube, hopefully they don't pull the plug on us at any point, although we kind of suspect they might at some point. You can scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you could type in the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of your screen to support us financially and be able to talk about stories like this. Or if you're in the YouTube chat, if you want to donate and you forget the link, type in !donate, all one word, and the Ko-fi link will pop up. You click on it, and then you can give as much as you want. Anything as low as $1 will help us. And of course, as we say, it's kind of, money is tight these days. So as much as we love the money, we also want people to take care of themselves. So if you want to support us, the free way is by liking and subscribing to the channel. Make sure you chat, because YouTube does some mess that they unsubscribe people at times. And then share our clips and our streams to help fight the suppression that we see on YouTube. And make sure you leave a comment. So what's your opinion in terms of academia kind of influencing the genocide from both the side of Israel and the US? And do you think it's equitable that Israel is able to send probably as many students as they can to take part in the resources that we're able to offer here, but not to Palestinians? And I have a theory as to why that's the case. Unfortunately, I won't be able to talk about it here, at least if you're watching it as a segment. So But let us know what you think. Like, why do you think it's so one-sided that the U.S. is allowing Israeli students to come and study, but not necessarily Palestinians, or at least a very small amount? And thanks for watching. So, yeah, so basically, this came up in my head because we talked about this before. They do not want the idea of having Palestinians rise up to potentially
leadership
revolts,
position, right?
in map of our word, right, in terms against Israel. That's why they're actively killing children, because they will be the ones to lead it. So if you don't have any children, you're not going to have the potential. We said it kind of like a Jesus type figure, literally in many ways, to rise up against the occupation. So the way you do that is to destroy the institutions that educate. So again, it's the idea of like they want to push the Israeli propaganda at the expense of Palestinian salvation. So scary thought, honestly. And it's like, and again, it's the idea that U.S. universities who claim, oh, like, we support all sides. No, you don't, because you're not doing it. You're not being equitable in the way that if you are doing it at all. So as you're liberalizing it, it's like, you see the genocide, you should cut ties and force their hand. Actually, I think that could be a way. If the government's not going to do it, then I think the schools should do it. But then now we have Trump, who's going to force his hand, and that's what we've seen. But that should have really been the case under Biden, though, because they probably would have been in a better position for Biden maybe to do something if schools were forced to push Israel's hand in terms of, we're not offering you anything, we're cutting these partnerships unless you stop this genocide. I'm sure Biden, not to say he would have done anything, but it would have made Biden a little bit more, I would argue, more considerate than Trump would ever be. So again, that's just my thought, but yeah, but it definitely is apparent that, and we know this, that our universities have a lot of power. And especially given the money, as we said, like, Columbia is able to give like half, 25, how much was it at the beginning? Like 500 billion?
No, half a million. Half a billion.
Wait, let me check.
It was half a billion.
Yeah, half a billion.
500 million.
Half a billion that's Harvard, for essentially reparations too.
Oh no, the reparations, it was more than that. It was like, I had to look at what.
Half a billion. I'm reading your article. $500 million to settle accusations of
anti-Semitism. Yeah, but I don't think that's I don't think that's the reparations thing. I think that's separate.
No, that was Columbia, but I'm saying for Harvard, this is kind of a version of.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah.
Because, the Trump administration, but I would argue it is, honestly, because same shit. Like, Harvard Jewish staff probably would complain of anti-Semitism. Trump forced Harvard's hand because they wouldn't get funding otherwise. So Harvard caved. Same thing with Columbia. They caved. So it's reparations. It's reparations. So if you don't want to call it that, fine, but it is what it is, So, at least, I don't want to say at least, but Columbia was what, 200 million. But this guy's, but that, again, this shows you, like, Harvard, the endowment that Harvard has is not, they can run Massachusetts if they really wanted to, and they kind of do, but but that's the thing, especially a lot of these Ivy Leagues that are old as hell, they have money, like, no, they do, like, like, especially for me, living right by Harvard when I lived in Boston, like, the way they're just able to buy up land and build buildings just like that, it's just, like, ridiculous. Like, but yeah, these big schools, especially, like, the Ivy Leagues, like, they are essentially but they essentially are big industries too. Like,
Yeah.
they're major employment, institutions in a lot of these schools, generally, or cities, generally speaking, especially in Boston, where it's like 70 colleges and universities. Harvard is definitely like the top of those. But, but that's my point. It's like, and kind of what I said last week, you have all this money to give away to relation to Israel, but you don't have that kind of money to take care of Black people or really anyone of color, or maybe even poorer, low income white students. But you immediately give it to Israel, to essentially cause war. So that's kind of like where I'm kind of like, nah, that's no bueno. So, yeah, that's just kind of my point. It's like the
Right.
money they're able to throw to essentially perpetuate war, even though they say they're not. But they have difficulty giving people like an education when they could give so much more scholarship money to people who really need it. Israel
Hey,
doesn't
dude.
fucking need it.
No. They've got plenty to give around. But I'm trying to look at chat. Chat said Max RJ, they promote the Greater Israel Project along with Google. Yeah, which all those tech companies are all revolving doors for all of that. What else? Vicky Adams was talking about Unit 8200, which I'm surprised that hasn't gotten more press, honestly. Like, I only really found out about that particular unit not that long ago, But,
right.
Vicky Adams, can we
offer U.S. kids education? Yes. I mean, that's exactly my point. It's like, we have so much issues with education. Well, first of all, like, our public education is funded by property taxes, which, given the redlining and the disparity of people of color, Black people especially, and then like even for low income people, like, if your house is not worth a lot, your schools are not gonna get that much. Why aren't universities stepping in to kind of in part fill in the gap, especially for oppressed people? Like, there's the means to do it. Not to say every college can do that, but many can and should.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a way to kind of bring people into your campus to learn. So why not build that incentive within our public education system, instead of having it be like a country club of sorts where only like certain people are able to get into if you have the means to, and the rest of us have to fight in order to get in.
Right.
So, just being more involved in the community instead of being kind of like estranged from it is, I think, what I'm saying.
Well,
especially in Massachusetts, man.
Yeah, it's fucking. I mean, you got MIT and Harvard there, right? But
you have MIT, you have Harvard, you have Boston University, you have Boston College, you have Tufts. I can't name. You have Northeastern. Especially like Harvard, MIT are like
massive,
the big ones. So their endowment is ridiculous. So like, it's not to say they don't do a lot for for Boston and Cambridge in general in Massachusetts, but they can do a hell of a lot more, especially if you want to close the achievement gap. Like, there could be better ways of their being able to possibly in the and like I'm not really big on this stuff, so I don't know how exactly that will work. But again, like they can do a whole lot to build in the idea of community where instead of, like having low income students basically kind of scrap and scrape for the possibility of going into those,
Yeah. Which is really the possibility of paying them money.
Right. If you're able to, if a lot of our work, if our government is able to figure out where private prisons are going to be based on, reading levels of kids, that's the thing. Like, they're able to predict what the prison pipeline of like what communities will need more prisons based on the reading scores of students. Like, if you're able to figure that out, how about maybe building schools within those neighborhoods or close to it, and build a pipeline to that? Like, so that you give the incentive of students to actually do well and wanting to go to college and get a better education. But even in that, that could be a problem because we don't want students to critically think about their world and possibly damage the system that is right now oppressing us, even within academia.
Right.
So academia right now is essentially running as a business, not as a way to radicalize yourself.
Yeah.
So
or educate
so it does make
anyone
sense from a capitalist standpoint.
Yeah. So, but all right, let's get to our next one, just in order of time. So you mentioned earlier a bit about Hasbara, which for those who don't know, that's the Israeli word for like propaganda, right?
Right.
And the ones who invent and peddle it, I think it was Matt Kennard was the first one I saw using it. HASBARISTAS, right? And that might be just the Israeli word for the people who do that, but I kind of thought it was a funny play on words with barista. So
Sure.
either way, which you should be boycotting the HASBARISTAS at Starbucks, probably, seeing as how their company still gives Israel money, right? But so I saw this, right? So this is from Zachary Foster. The Nazi propagandist Joseph Goebbels would have been proud of Israel's legitimization cell, just reported by 972 Mag, a unit whose purpose is to try to convince you that journalists are terrorists. I don't even know what to say anymore. So we're just going to read that full article because that's what we do here, right? So this is from Yuval Abraham over at 972, which 972 is a supposed left-wing Israeli publication, right? So, keep those skeptical glasses on as you read this. But they write, legitimization cell, Israeli unit tasked with linking Gaza journalists to Hamas, treating the media as a battlefield. A secretive army intelligence squad scoured Gaza for material to bolster Israeli Hasbara, including questionable claims that would justify the killing of Palestinian reporters. So we reported on the killing of those Al Jazeera journalists recently, and we pushed back on a lot of this Hasbara, but now you're going to see where that Hasbara came from, right? So the Israeli military has operated a special unit called the Legitimization Cell, tasked with gathering intelligence from Gaza that can bolster Israel's image in the international media. According to 3 intelligence sources who spoke to 972, and local call confirmed the unit's existence. Established after October 7th, the unit sought information on Hamas's use of schools and hospitals for military purposes, and on failed rocket launches by armed Palestinian groups that harmed civilians in the enclave. It has also been assigned to identify Gaza-based journalists it could portray as undercover Hamas operatives, in an effort to blunt growing global outrage over Israel's killing of reporters, the latest of whom was Al Jazeera journalist Anza al-Sharif, killed in an Israeli airstrike this past week. According to the sources, legitimization cell motivation was not security, but public relations, Driven by anger that Gaza-based reporters were smearing Israel's name in front of the world, its members were eager to find a journalist they could link to Hamas and mark as a target, one source said. The source described a recurring pattern in the unit's work. Whenever criticism of Israel in the media intensified on a particular issue, the legitimization cell was told to find intelligence that could be declassified and employed publicly to counter the narrative. If the global media is talking about Israel killing innocent journalists, then immediately there's a push to find one journalist who might not be so innocent, as if that somehow makes killing the other 20 acceptable, the intelligence source said. Often it was just Israel's political echelon that dictated to the army which intelligence areas the unit should focus on. Another source added, information gathered by the legitimization cell was also passed regularly to the Americans through direct channels. I wonder how that worked out. That's a secret little bit of information. What Americans, right? That's what I want to know. You know,
right.
I'm betting press is what I'm betting. Intelligence officers said they were told their work was vital to allowing Israel to prolong the war. Okay. The team regularly collected intelligence that could be used for Hasbara, say a stockpile of Hamas weapons found in a school, anything that could bolster Israel's international legitimacy to keep fighting. Another source explained the idea was to allow the military to operate without pressure so countries like America wouldn't stop supplying weapons. So clearly they're worried about that, aren't they? So the unit also sought evidence linking Gaza's police to the October 7th attack in order to justify targeting them and dismantling Hamas's civilian security force, one source familiar with the legitimization cell work said. Two of the intelligence sources recounted that in at least one case since the war began, the cell misrepresented intelligence in a way that allowed for the false portrayal of a journalist as a member of Hamas. They were eager to label him as a target, as a terrorist, to say it's okay to attack him, one source recalled. They said during the day he's a journalist, at night he's a platoon commander. Everyone was excited, but there was a chain of errors and quarter cutting. In the end, they realized he really was a journalist, the source continued, and the journalist wasn't targeted. For now, until they find something they can fucking pin on this guy, right? So, a similar pattern of manipulation is evident in the intelligence presented on al-Sharif. According to the documents released by the army, which have not been independently verified, he was recruited to Hamas in 2013 and remained active until he was injured in 2017, meaning that even if the documents were accurate, they suggested he played no role in the current war. So, again, this is why I'm like, you got to be careful with 972, because, like, they don't know if this is accurate either, but, like, they'll still put it in there. The same applies to the case of journalist Ismail Al-Ghul, who was killed in a July 2024 Israeli airstrike along with his cameraman in Gaza City. A month later, the army claimed he was a military wing operative and Nukba terrorist, citing a 2021 document allegedly retrieved from a Hamas computer, unquote. Yet that document stated he received his military rank in 2007 when he was just 10 years old and 7 years before he was supposedly recruited to Hamas. So, again, they can't even make things up properly. So, but one of the legitimization cell's first high-profile efforts came on October 17th after the deadly explosion at Al-Ali Hospital in Gaza City. We remember, while international media, citing Gaza's Ministry of Health, reported that an Israeli strike had killed 500 Palestinians, Israeli officials said the blast was caused by a misfired Islamic Jihad rocket and the death toll was far lower. So we covered this when it happened, and we said we immediately were able to push back on this Hasbara, but clearly, the day after the explosion, the army released a recording that the cell had located in intelligence intercepts, presented as a phone call between two Hamas operatives, blaming the incident on Islamic Jihad misfire. Many global outlets subsequently considered the claim likely, including some who conducted their own investigations, and the release dealt a severe blow to the credibility of Gaza's health ministry, hailed within the Israeli army as a victory for the cell. Right? Which, again, wrong. Palestinian human rights activist told 972 and Local Call in December that he was stunned to hear his own voice in the recording, which he said was simply a benign conversation with another Palestinian friend. He insisted he had never been a Hamas member. A source who worked with the legitimization cell that the publishing classified material like a phone call was deeply controversial. It's very much not in Unit 8200's DNA to expose our capabilities for something as vague as public opinion. Except you fucking do it all the time, you fucks. Anyway.
Right.
Still, the three intelligence sources said the army treated the media as an extension of the battlefield, which they've been doing, allowing it to declassify sensitive intelligence for public release. Even intelligence personnel outside the legitimization cell were told to flag any material that might aid Israel in the information war. There was this phrase, "that's good for legitimacy," one source recalled. The goal was simply to find as much material as possible to serve Hasbara efforts, just to make Israel more legitimate in their genocide. After the publication of this article, official security sources confirmed to 972 and Local Call that various research teams have been established inside Israeli intelligence over the past 2 years with the aim of exposing Hamas lies. They said that the goal was to discredit journalists reporting on the war on broadcast networks in allegedly a reliably precise way, but who they claimed are actually part of Hamas. According to the sources, these research teams do not play a role in the selection of individuals targeted to be attacked. Yeah, but it might be pulled into your AI, which fucking does. So, on August 10th, the Israeli army killed 6 journalists in a strike it openly admitted was aimed at Al Jazeera reporter Anas al-Sharif. 2 months earlier in July, the CPJ had warned it feared for al-Sharif's life, saying he was targeted by an Israeli military smear campaign, which he believes is a precursor to his assassination. After, al-Sharif posted a viral video in July of himself in tears while covering Gaza's hunger crisis. The Israeli army's Arabic language spokesperson, Avichai Adre, published 3 different videos attacking him, accusing him of propaganda and of participating in Hamas' false starvation campaign, whatever the fuck that is. Al-Sharif identified a link between Israelis' media war and the military one. Adre's campaign is not only a media threat or an image destruction, it is a real-life threat, he told CPJ. Less than a month later, he was killed, with the army presenting what they said was declassified intelligence of his membership in Hamas to justify the strike. The military has already claimed in October that 6 Al Jazeera journalists, including al-Sharif, were military operatives, an accusation he vehemently denied. He became the second from that list to be targeted after reporter Hassam Shabat since the October accusation. His whereabouts were well known, leading many observers to question whether killing al-Sharif was regularly reported from Gaza City was part of Israel's plan to enforce a media blackout ahead of its military preparations to capture the city, which it's been doing. In response to questions from 972, the IDF spokesperson reiterated, and again, this is what the fuck are you doing, 972? The IDF attacked a terrorist from the Hamas terrorist organization who is operating under the guise of a journalist from the Al Jazeera network in the northern Gaza Strip, and claimed that Army does not intentionally harm uninvolved individuals and journalists in particular, all in accordance with international law. You could fucking lie to somebody else there, home dog. You know what I mean? Like, we all know better. Like, they just say these things so that hopefully, like it's what we know when we get to the stuff in the ICJ, this is the kind of stuff that is brought up by the defense of like, well, we said we followed the laws, you know? Like, meanwhile, your fucking actions, like, prior to the strike, the spokesperson said steps were taken to reduce the chance of harming civilians, including the use of precise weapons, aerial observations, and additional intelligence information. Which I also, I thought about this the other day. They're also just saying that Al Jazeera as a whole is terrorist organization practically, and
Right.
that like, you know, they do none of their due diligence. They just accept terrorists in their thing. And anyway, but at just 28, al-Sharif had become one of Gaza's most recognized journalists. He's among 186 reporters and media workers killed on the Strip since October 7th, according to CPJ, the deadliest period for journalists since the group began collecting data in 1992. Other organizations have put the death toll as high as 270. All of them have to be Hamas, though, right? If these words reach you, know that Israel has succeeded in killing me and silencing my voice, al-Sharif wrote in his final message, posthumously published on his social media accounts. I have lived through pain in all its details, tasted suffering and loss many times, yet I never once hesitated to convey the truth as it is, without distortion or falsification. So, thoughts so far, Care Bear?
I mean, kind of going with our last segment, you know, it's just kind of part of the machine, you know, like Israel wants to, it's again, well, not again, but manufactured consent, Israeli version, like as a way for, and it's funny because, you know, again, in the last segment, that people like the idea of being pro-Palestine is almost considered naive.
Yeah.
Like I say it's more nuanced, if anything, but it's still the idea of have people not think critically about what's happening in the Middle East, because God forbid if people think critically, then they will have a better understanding of the issue, the underlying issues of why Israel is doing what they're doing, and it's other than like Hamas, and you know that's the talking point. But it's working because people are not necessarily in the position to necessarily think through a lot of this stuff, and not to say people don't care, but most people just are going from their day to day and are not going to think about these major topics, especially a little more critically. That's why universities are almost kind of a detriment to that, because that's a place where it should be. Well, I would argue just any school in general, but especially in college where you're a little older and you're able to kind of think more deeply about, especially in the area of study, that's the idea. Like you are able to think about this stuff more critically. So it definitely makes more sense that you're going to have a lot more Israeli, you know, students and professors to kind of come in to kind of hopefully build that support or kind of the complicity in terms of what, or justification in terms of what they're doing, versus hearing nothing from the Palestinian side to kind of counter that possibility, that idea of thinking. So, you know, so it's a way of suppression of the Palestinian voices in order to uplift the Israeli ones, and to kind of have us think, oh, you know, like Israel must be right because of X, Y, and Z. So I think generally it's the idea that the masses are not going to look into this too deep, that they think that they're able to get away with it. But again, it's not working given what we're seeing online. We have seen, you know, the destruction and the death and, you know, and all of that online for like, especially the last 2 years and counting. So, and people are kind of seeing for the bullshit. And I think in a way, the media, even though ironically they're trying to suppress a lot of it, is actually in a lot of ways are helping to uplift the Palestinian cause in a lot of ways, because by suppressing it now, and especially since we have online to kind of see a lot of this bullshit, that people are able to kind of see what Israel is doing is bullshit and are calling them out accordingly, and are and again, I don't want to necessarily say, especially if people are Jewish, to isolate them completely, but you like the argument that Israel or Jewish people would make is that, oh, we need to have a safe place because we're going to come to a point where people are going to hate us again. Well, I would argue in a lot of ways, not for all, I think generally as a religious group, you're making the case for yourselves in light of what people are doing in the name of your faith.
Right.
Are doing. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, it doesn't because it's not working. Or at least it's not having the hold that it used to. Given what's been happening and what we've been able to see, which has been readily available online.
Yeah. But speaking of online, here is Caitlin Johnstone, right? Writing, Israel is so fucking evil that it has a military unit dedicated to coming up with excuses for the IDF's atrocities, which, not that I'm surprised, but they also have admitted editing of Wikipedia, right? Which this was from a while ago, but here is Yesha Council Director Naftali Bennett, right? We should know that name by now.
Yesha, in conjunction with My Israel, has arranged instruction day for wiki editors. The goal of the day is to teach people how to edit in Wikipedia, which is the #1 source of information today in the world. As a way of example, if someone searches the Gaza flotilla, we want to be there. We want to be the guys who influence what is written there, how it's written, and to ensure that it's balanced and Zionist in nature.
I came here to learn more about how we as Israelis and as Jews can defend Israel online, on the internet, and particularly in Wikipedia in this case. Wikipedia is a bit of a complex system and it's sometimes hard to figure out the rules. I've personally tried to edit things in Wikipedia that were against Israel, small things, and my changes were erased or undone, and I didn't understand why. And I think that this kind of knowledge is important for anyone who wants to be active in defending Israel on the internet, so that we can go and we can see the information and we can say this isn't quite right, it's showing one side of the story, and I have the power and the right to change that. And in general, it's so important for us to be online, working to defend ourselves and to prove to the world and to ourselves that we are just and we are right. And because right now, if you look online, if you do searches for certain terms related to Israel, it's just filled with anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and garbage. And there's not enough of us out there working to counteract that and make sure that the other side of the story, our side of the story, and our right side of the story is getting the right coverage and the coverage that it needs. So this type of initiative and initiatives like that to educate and promote defense of Israel online are extremely important, and I hope we'll see more of this.
So they've been doing this stuff. I mean, I don't know when that was filmed, right? But seems not that long ago, you know?
Right.
Like early 2000s, maybe, you know?
Maybe.
But I also have this. They also have an entire apparatus to subvert and threaten American journalists who oppose the atrocities. I wonder how they do that, Collin. What do you think?
Israel decided to set up permanent institutional structures to control how Americans would think about the Middle East. In 1983, Israel launched the HASBARISTAS project, the aim of which was to ensure good press in the U.S. media. The goal was to train Israeli diplomats in communications and public relations. For example, they trained press officers in Israeli consulates in the U.S. to ensure that American journalists would write stories favorable to Israel. As one of these press officers said in the 1980s, he had breakfast, lunch, and dinner with journalists, and that a typical day would involve conversations with producers at leading news and TV talk shows about the content of the program. He described it as, in fact, quote, a joint formulation of ideas. This targeting of the American media goes on in the present day.
The abuse against a journalist is something you just have to take into account. If you both literally and metaphorically, if you work in the Middle East, you've got to take the sticks and stones. What I object to is that my American colleagues don't seem to be prepared to do that.
And even in Israel itself, you can find the main daily newspapers, like Haaretz, for example, provides coverage on the ground and analysis, some of which has views on the conflict that that would be almost beyond the pale for an American journalist, say at the New York Times, to write.
The main major television news networks and newspapers in the United States have long ago got their fear to be supreme over their duties as journalists. They are not monitoring the centers of power when it comes to the relationship between America and the Middle East, Israel and America and the Arabs and the Palestinians. They will not ask the right questions, they will not report it using the correct words, they will not confront the reality, and they've given up. And I think once you acquire fear, it's very difficult to get rid of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's Robert Fisk from, I don't know, 15 years ago, probably. Right. But, yeah, any closing thoughts?
I mean, I think, again, it just shows how powerful media is. And how well connected you are, you're able to, I mean, can you imagine what all this country can look like if we're able to kind of have this kind of like discussion / ideology towards, I don't know, like favorable populist policy, like universal healthcare or like a living wage or fill in the blank of whatever. Like, you don't see that. And you know why? Because that's not necessarily it's not favorable necessarily to corporations. So again, this is just kind of like an arm of enriching corporations who will benefit, and by extension, the politicians and the institutions that are essentially promoting this. Again, talked about in the last segment, colleges and universities are benefiting from, from the partnerships that they have with Israel. So, as you said earlier, it's kind of like this, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours type thing. Yeah. So again, you don't see that kind of discourse among for something that can be extremely positive for the American people. If anything, it's kind of like, oh, we have to talk about it. Oh, we need to have this task force to study it. And like no one is talking about, oh, we need to have a task force to determine whether Israel has the right to the land. Yeah. There should be really a task force to that. But no, it's been like, no, we're going to have it. It belongs to us, given, and we'll get into that into the next segment a little bit of, oh, it's ours, given what essentially says in the Torah, and we're going to take it. No questions asked. And we have the money and the means to do it. So, and we will bribe you in order to make it happen.
Well, and I just find it super hypocritical of like,
sure,
we accept this from Israel, but like if any other country had active military units and active intelligence agencies that have openly said they are like influencing our press, government, politicians, like business leaders, education systems, like we would have had we would throw them out of anything. Like imagine if Iran was doing that, or
exactly
China or Russia, like any of those things. If we had that on the books from them, we would be putting up defenses against it, let alone like, you know, I just find it interesting, you know? So, but anyway, you got anything else to add?
No.
Cool. Well,
I'll share more in the next segment.
Talking about these stories are certainly why we're demonetized. So you can scan that QR code on your screen or go to ko-fi.com/Indie News Network if you want to help us out with some dollary dues. We appreciate it. But, you know, if you can't do that because you're trying to save all your monies, just like and subscribe, hit the share button, and leave a comment. Let us know what you think. You know, when have you seen this Hasbara active? But otherwise, thanks for watching. Cool. Well, chat was saying, where is everyone? I don't know. I don't know where people are at.
Although it's growing now. Like, I
Yeah.
think we have had more people to chat with in the last few minutes, so.
Might be someone else was live that they're at.
That's okay. People have been very good in watching us in the playback or us usually. So. Not to worry about that.
Someone did say, Vicky Adams, Wikipedia is a community of volunteers. What gives them authority? Where does their knowledge on all subjects come from? Well, theoretically, it's peer-reviewed, right? Like, I mean, it's by a group of... So the way Wikipedia is allegedly supposed to work is that all these, like, anonymous volunteers are supposed to be, you know, peer-reviewing all these, like, Wikipedia articles or whatever, right? So that theoretically the information there should be accurate and continually updated, but it's manipulated like all these other platforms. So, you know, but anyway, yeah, I don't know. I was always told not to use it, right? Especially in research papers. Don't fucking use Wikipedia for that. But well, you want to just get to our next one? I'm down.
Hold on. I just got, just as a side, I just got a message from my old roommate. He says I'm famous.
Oh, okay.
I think I showed up in a TikTok.
Sure.
I think this is in regard. It's funny because, like, I was talking to my colleagues today, and a couple of them asked me, "Were you at the Columbia Rights raid?" And I was like, "Yes." And they were like, "We were able to recognize you from your legs." Like, we
funny.
like,
so those leg days are working out, bro.
I guess.
You know?
I mean, that's a low key compliment. So, like,
the calf raise machine be fucking doing the right things. But
I mean, the squats and the hip thrusts and like the box step ups.
Hip thrusts are the worst.
Hip thrust, but
yes,
hip thrusts suck. Yeah. But it makes for my TMI. But like, it's made my booty like really.
Yeah, I'll introduce you to deep lunges. You know. Those are technically better for stretched position. It's just awkward to get set up in hip thrust. That's my only problem with them. They're fine. It's just setting up hip thrust is always like a pain in the butt, you know?
Well, so, I would just argue any setup for any compound movement generally is awkward.
Yeah, but like that one specifically.
I think that's what it is. But I think, especially legs.
Yeah,
like it's like
but like
it's just as much work.
A squat rack with a bar, like that's fine. Like that's fine. It's getting it like okay, you got to get on the floor. You got to get a bench behind you. You've got to get, you know, the little pad underneath it so it doesn't hurt your hippies. And then you know you got to get under the bar, and then it's just Like all the other movements are like a little easier to like deadlift, put weights on it, pick it up, you know? Like it's fine. Squats, put the bar on it, squat. Like, I don't know, they're just weird. But
yeah.
But
Anyway,
I'm ready for our next one.
I got recognized for my legs.
Yeah.
So funny. But moving on, but it kind of relates to your last story, but we're going to take it in another angle, on the more religious angle, which we've talked about before many times on this show. So many of you probably know this lady, but for those of you who don't, this is Julia I'm going to say her name wrong, and I lived in Uganda, so I apologize to my Ugandan family if you ever watch this. But her name is Julia Sebutinde. I guess that's how you say it. She is an ICJ judge who voted against essentially calling what's happening in Israel a plausible genocide.
Right.
We've spoken on her a few times on this show and we've talked about how, she has ties to a church that I'm very familiar with, that is basically run by Christian Zionists. Well, now she did an interview with, I guess, the Ugandan arm of the Monitor, where she's basically saying that the country has disowned her for her views on Israel, which, while I would guess it's true that they kind of disowned her, I don't think it's coming from. Basically, I think it's a whole lot of BS, and they're essentially throwing her under the bus.
Yeah.
And we'll get into why I think that later. But so as I said, you brought a lot of this stuff in for me in preparation for this story, so I appreciate that.
Right.
But you brought this in from Craig Bokiber.
Mokber?
Okay, probably.
Yeah.
In a new interview, Julia Sebutinde, the ICJ judge and Christian Zionist, who shocked the world by disregarding international law to defend Israel's genocide in Gaza, said, "We are in the end times." And we talked about that. I think Max Blumenthal did a article on the Gray Zone discussing that, just how her views kind of relate to the religious ideology of why she's pro-Israel. And the Lord is counting on me to stand on the side of Israel. So we're going to get into the article right now. So as I said, this is from the Monitor, I believe from the Ugandan arm of the magazine, where she said, she's in her fifis, and it's like, my country disowned me after Israel-Gaza ruling. It's written by Anthony Wasaka. So she said, I will never forget the day the judgment came out. Even though the government was against me, I remember one ambassador saying, ignore her because her ruling is not a representation of Uganda. And I believe I forgot who he is. I should have posted it, but I think I read a tweet of that ambassador that said that to her.
Like, why are you crying? Like, you are one person. You shouldn't be the voice of an entire country. Like, it makes sense to me for someone to be like,
right.
But this person would speak for me.
She's not. But that's not it. She's not. Yeah. And I'll get into why I believe that later. So, as I said, I believe they're throwing her under the bus, given the overwhelmingly dissent that the world has for Israel right now. But anyway, Justice Julia Sebutinde has criticized her homeland, Uganda, for joining the rest of the world in condemning her dissenting judgment in the Israel-Gaza genocide case. She made the ruling earlier this year at the International Court of Justice, where she serves. It was the first time the 71-year-old jurist had publicly addressed the intense criticism. There are now about 30 countries against Israel. The Lord is counting on me to stand on the side of Israel. The whole world was against Israel, including my country, Justice Sebutinde said on August 10th at Watoto Church during the launch of a new mission ministry for 8 members aged 55 and above, known as Golden Legacy, where she is a member. Keep that in mind regarding this church. We talked about this church before. We're going to refer to it again later. She added, I will never forget the day the judgment came out. Even though the government was against me, I remember one ambassador saying, ignore her because her ruling is not a representation of Uganda. The media ran this to fuel more anger and sentiment. Such sentiments can only come from the pit of hell. Justice Sebutinde was the sole dissenting judge on the 17-member panel that earlier this year directed Israel to take urgent measures to prevent and punish direct incitement of the genocide and war in Gaza. Her stance drew widespread commendation, with accusation of plagiarism and bias allegedly linked to her perceived ties to Israel and Christian Zionist beliefs. Justice Sebutinde's ruling at the ICJ does not represent the government's position on the situation in Palestine. Uganda's permanent representative of the UN, Adona Adire, can you zoom in? Thank you, posted on X in January. Uganda's support for the plight of the Palestinian people has been expressed through our voting pattern at the United Nations, he added. A Kenyan user on X wrote, Judge Julia Sebutinde is such an embarrassment to our country and a disgrace to humanity. She didn't just vote against South Africa's petition, she voted against reason and morality, justice and freedom, love and compassion. She voted against the very soul of humanity. South Africa brought the case against Israel on December 29, 2024, accusing it of genocidal acts in its military operations in Gaza. When contacted yesterday, Mr. Vincent Bagire Wassa, the permanent secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, said she made an independent decision that was being misconstrued to be a decision of Uganda. The comments were to make clear that her decision was independent. Speaking further, Judge Sebutinde revealed that around the time of the ruling, the ICJ was due to hold elections for its leadership, including the vice president's position, which she sought. She said that due to the uproar over her judgment, she almost withdrew from the race, but felt compelled by God to continue. A few days before the judgment, there were going to be leadership changes. I wanted to be the vice president. On the morning of the election, your peers elect you. I was feeling sick from worry and media coverage, so I decided to stay in bed. But God said, you coward, wake up. I got out of bed and went to work, she recalled.
God. This woman's hearing voices, Collin. What? Sorry.
She said a fellow judge later asked her why she thought she had been elected. I said no. He told me it was because of my character and the independence attested by my country. So whatever the devil had planned for me, God turned it around. This happened the day after the verdict, she told the congregation. Judge Sebutinde, now serving in the second and final 9-year term at the ICJ in the Netherlands, said the current crisis in Gaza was a sign of the end times foretold in the Bible, urging Christians to remain vigilant. There is something I want to share. I have a very strong conviction that we are in the end times. The signs are being shown in the Middle East. I want to be on the right side of history.
Well, too late for that.
I am convinced that time is running out. I would encourage you to follow developments in Israel. I am humbled that God has allowed me to be a part of the last days, she said. The end times refer to events leading up to the physical return of Jesus Christ as prophesied in the Bible. So actually, this is the clip that we mentioned her belief regarding the end times, where she goes into that further. But as I said, so we're going to do a little inception here. So we read this article from Max Blumenthal a few months ago, up to a year ago, where we talk more about her religious position in all of this, but also why I believe that Uganda, well, at least their leadership, is throwing her under the bus. So let's play the clip. I think it's about 3 minutes. And then we'll get into it more.
Yep.
Skinner's eschatological view of history clearly informs Sebutinde's dissent against the ICJ's ruling on South Africa's genocide case against Israel. Though Uganda's foreign ministry condemned her radical opinion, powerful evangelical figures inside the country with close ties to the presidency hailed her as a heroine. This is why I'm going back before, why I felt like. So, as we said, and this was probably public, that there were, like, within the presidential circle, they were praising her for it. They were praising her for a vote. And again, living in Uganda, like, and I hate saying this in this way, but I wouldn't say there's a large Christian, like, presence in the country. There is, but it's large in the sense of, again, it's kind of what we see here, probably what you might equivocate to what you might see in terms of church, I would argue, in the South, possibly. Like, it's just a lot of literal interpretation of the Bible. Like, there's no nuance at all. You have to take the Bible for what it says. And especially given that the rise of Christianity, I would argue, has been due to a lot of white missionaries who are coming into the country. And I know that because once upon a time I was involved in a group like that. Not to say I don't regret it completely, because I've been able to have relationships with Ugandan people now that I'm able to speak outside of that. But that's how I came into, my relationship and my fondness for the country was through the church. So I'm able to say that on the based on what I've seen, that there is very little, I wouldn't say debate, but there's no discourse in terms of how the Bible should be interpreted, how it should relate to what is happening today, and basically the history around, again, the Bible was written by man, but the Bible was written, again, a lot of the Bible chapters, especially in the New Testament, especially if you look at Paul, were written as letters, and they were written as a way to be read out to a crowd. So there was definitely like a style of writing in order to appeal to a larger audience. But the idea is that, and especially like in those times, you would go into a group and talk through a lot of what Paul might have said, or maybe what an apostle might have written. We don't do that. It's just the idea of like, take your Bible for its word, listen to it literally, and move on with your day. So there isn't really enough at that discourse, that biblical discourse, which fortunately I was able to have because, as a theology major in college, and actually, funny enough, I was actually pretty lucky to go to a Catholic school where we were encouraged to do that. And that was, but they don't get that kind of discourse in Africa, in Uganda. I would argue they don't get that discourse in education system in general. It's very much like teacher or mentor or whoever gives you the information, you take it in and regurgitate it. So it's very much like that traditional education setup, which unfortunately is how the church system over there is set up. And many of these leaders, especially a lot of these larger churches that you might see in Kampala, especially, are led by white Westerners. So Watoto is one of those churches. So it makes sense to me, knowing this church in particular, because I visited the church when I was there, why she thinks the way she thinks. And as I said, a lot of these churches are run by white people. And especially if white people here, especially with generally how, if you're a Christian Zionist, how pro-Israel you are, that would make sense in terms of our views. But going back to this, that was along the side. But as I said, presidential circles were actually praising her for how she voted. So let's go back into it to give more specifics of what we read from Max's article. Like a lot that was kind of, kind of a cover for what they really think. And Max pulled up, if you scroll up, just to read the name, because it's kind of small. So Patience M, and I'm going to pronounce it, I'm sorry, Rabiongo, I guess. So she tweeted. So she said on Instagram, you scroll down, not all heroes wear capes. Julia Sebutinde has made a historic stand at the ICJ. May God always remember her for her mercy, and may Uganda as a nation always be found on the Lord's side. 2 prayer emojis and the Ugandan flag. So Patience is actually, if you zoom out, Patience happens to be the daughter of Yoweri Museveni, the Ugandan president. The flamboyantly evangelical president of Uganda, whose wife Janet, a close ally of Watoto Church, and fun fact, a lot of my mentors at the time at the ministry I worked at met her and liked her. So, that says something. Is known for her biblical interpretations of history. Frankie Aske, So I think that's enough, but you get the point. So the First Lady of Uganda also goes to this church.
Okay.
So for me, it's very hard to believe that they're throwing her under the bus. I think they might be throwing her under the bus publicly, given the backlash that, being supportive of Israel has gotten worldwide. But again, at least within that circle, they publicly praise her. And again, so someone like Janet, I would kind of call her like the Ugandan Michelle Obama. Like, she has very high prestige in the country. She's very well liked. But as I said, more importantly, she also goes to this church. So you can tell, like, a lot of people who go to this church are very high up status-wise in Uganda. So the idea that allegedly these people are now saying to her, "You suck," I really do not believe at all, especially given the ties they have to this church. So I think they have a public. So it seems to me now they have a public position, trying to save face in the world discourse of people talking about Gaza, and especially given the genocide. But I'm very certain that they're still pretty pleased with her. But especially, I know her church is still pretty pleased with her of her vote. So really, this interview, I think she was up in her fees because people are like, "Oh, you suck," or whatever. But I don't think she really particularly cares, because she's getting the praise, I believe, from her congregation and these white missionaries who are probably very thankful for her for how she voted. So it comes off as disingenuous to me that she's kind of complaining now that her country is essentially disowning her. And it honestly, given, like how I know Ugandans are taught, it wouldn't surprise me if more Ugandan, like on a probably do not know the extent of what's happening in Gaza, especially if they're not, because again, social media is not as prevalent among the working class. Hell, internet is not as prevalent among the working class in Uganda, depending, Right. So I haven't been there in a few years, so it's hard for me to say now how internet and internet connectivity is like over there now. But at least when I was there, not many people were up in the know what was happening in the international news. I'm sure among the youth it's definitely a thing. And I think, if anything, that's where the dissent might be coming from, might be from the youth. But I don't think as far as the older generation in the country in particular would necessarily be in opposition of how she thinks. I think if anything, they might be more in favor of what she thinks. So I think any dissent she's getting might be from young people and not necessarily from older people that might not care that much, or if anything, might support her in her thinking. So that's kind of where I think that's just kind of like a whole lot of BS. So you brought this tweets. So this is from Zachary Foster as well, where he tweeted, "Did the Lord also tell her to plagiarize her legal opinions? As the biblical saying goes, those shall ensure one convinces the world of one's own intellectual and ethical bankruptcy." So this is from, his blog, where he writes that she is a plagiarist. Now, I actually didn't look at this just to be very
I put that in. I should have went and looked.
But do you have any information on this?
I don't, but I can go look it up real quick.
Okay. I should have looked it up too. But while you look it up, I'll read what Sam Husseini and Craig also tweeted. So Craig said in a new interview, we read that. So Sam said, in response to the tweet that we read earlier from Craig, said, "Christian, in quotation, Zionism is a global mega scam, not just in the US." And we've talked about how Christian Zionism is, I'll argue, more of an issue than it is as far as you are a Zionist and Jewish.
So in January 2024, Judge Sebutinde was the only judge of the 17 judges on the panel to vote against all 6 provisional measures in the genocide case brought by South Africa against Israel, including the order that Israel needed to take all measures within its power to prevent acts of genocide in Gaza. It was in her 36-page opinion on the legal status of Israel's occupation, however, published in July, where she plagiarized many sentences, including whole paragraphs. The legal opinion also includes lengthy historical discussions in which she got basic facts wrong and painted a distorted picture of the past. In fact, rather than citing historians and giving those historians credit for their work, Sebutinde plagiarized propagandists, themselves partisans, interested not in getting history right, but in defending the Zionist cause. So, and I'm just trying to look. So Sebutinde, prior to the establishment of British Mandatory Palestine, Palestinian Arabs used themselves as having a unified identity with the Arabs in the sub-region until the 12th century. And that's like Jewish virtual library. Prior to partition, Palestinian Arabs did not view themselves as having a separate identity. So it's like she literally pulled stuff from these particular like libraries, and put them in her stuff.
Right, which I wouldn't be surprised given her church that they had directed her to do.
She also plagiarized PragerU.
Oh God.
Yeah. So
again, I wouldn't be surprised if her church pushed her to do that.
Plagiarized a blog post by Douglas J. Fife from the Hudson Institute.
Now, Hudson Institute.
Yeah,
hold on. So, what's significant about the Hudson Institute that would connect us in the space?
I know of the one guy, fucking Saga
favorite. What's his name? I call him Token, but that's not his name.
Yeah, no, it's the one who astroturfed for Israel. I can't remember his name either.
Yeah, it's gonna come to me. But those of you know whose Sagas, I'm not sure if they're friends or at least that close anymore. But if you remember,
used to do a show together.
Right. If you guys remember Sagar, but I was thinking just of Sagar because he's like the Hudson Institute guy that everyone in our space knows. So, but if you guys remember that black guy's name, it's gonna come to me at some point.
But here's Douglas J. Fife, who writes, Palestine applied vaguely to a region that for the 400 years before World War I was part of the Ottoman Empire. Sebutinde writes, Palestine, like literally word for word, applied vaguely to a region. I mean, it's literally the same like punctuation and sentence structure. So, I mean, she just outright copy and pasted. So, but anyway, so I think I have this, right? So this is from Free Palestine TV. Esoteric end times fanaticism is driving all the Jewish and Christian Zionists ruling the West and its colonies. If you don't know that, you will not be able to understand why the genocide in Palestine continues, nor how to stop it before we end up in a nuclear holocaust. So, Husseini writes, it's kind of pathetic how so many are dwelling on this disgusting person when she really had no effect. What actually stopped the ICJ orders from being implemented was Algeria withdrawing the UNSCR to implement them, but they get a pass because rhetoric. If you don't know what I'm talking about, take a look at my writing, which we have in the past. So, but it is funny how that, like, you know, they use stuff like this to distract and like scapegoat. You know, it's like when they blame everything on Netanyahu, you know? So, but I brought this, which I found talking about Christian Zionism in general, right? And how it came to the States. So figured it would be good for this, but here.
This story is a textbook example of how religion manipulates politics. There are millions and millions more Christian Zionists than there are Jewish Zionists.
Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we are commanded to support Israel. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
But how did Christian Zionism take a hold of America? It all started with a Bible called the Scofield Bible, written by a charlatan lawyer named Cyrus Scofield in 1909. Yes, written. See, what was unique about this Bible is that even though it contained the Word of God, as written in the King James Version, for the first time ever, a Bible now included notes.
So, just as a fact, King James Version is probably among the worst translations of the Bible you should read if you're going to read any version. It's the worst one. So, and funny enough, a lot of older churches still use it.
Yep.
Like my mother's church still uses it. So it's not to say you can't read it, but it's like it loses again, the King James Version was written during the time of Shakespeare. So there's a lot of nuance and a lot of things, especially in the translation, that are not translated correctly in that version. That is still kept in, and you're going to lose a lot of that nuance. So just to kind of give you that context, like the King James Version of the Bible is probably the worst translation that you should read. Not to mention, it's probably the hardest that you should read, especially just for normal people who are not used to that language. And
you'll find this interesting.
Study guides and interpretations.
So this is so coming up in the Bible Belt South. Myself, you would find kids with like, you know, kids editions of the Bible that have like what it really means and, you know, various interpretations, right? And like a lot of them come from these places like PragerU, like, you know, that include all this like Zionism in there, you know.
By the author himself. So within his notes, Scofield literally invented something called the Palestinian covenant. And this covenant is Scofield's explanation of the verse Deuteronomy 30, where God guarantees and promises the land to the Jewish nation unconditionally. So this theory is based on something called dispensationalism, which was a very, very niche religious movement before Schofield came around. Now we know that Israel is just another name for the prophet Jacob, and he was given that name after he wrestled with God, because Israel means wrestled with God. But in the Schofield Bible, Schofield spreads this idea that Israel is a nation of God's chosen people where God has a distinct and separate plan for them. And that includes gathering Jewish people as a whole to Palestine in order to usher in the end of times and the second coming of Jesus. At that point, something called the rapture happens, where Jesus secretly comes and all of a sudden all the Christians are in a rapture and go up to the sky. And what will happen to the Jewish people down below? Well, unfortunately, 2/3 of them will perish. I swear. Completely invented. No other Bible mentions this. And of course, nowadays they call it the land covenant because they don't want to say Palestinian covenant because they don't want to even acknowledge that there's such a thing as Palestine. Now, why did Schofield, an alcoholic charlatan lawyer who went to jail for fraud, write a whole Bible? How did he fund publishing it with no wealth? Who funded Schofield's multiple trips to Europe for research? There are many theories about how this originated, including the fact that Schofield was a part of the Lotus Club, where prominent American Zionist and lawyer Samuel Untermyer also frequented, and that he used Schofield as a useful tool in order to spread Zionism in America. We may never know for sure what the origins of this whole project was, but it is very clear how it concluded. The mass influence on America that this Bible had to support the current colonial state of Israel is a matter of biblical prophecy. Free Palestine.
So, I've been looking at...
How is it is always the atheists, allegedly?
Don't blame that on us. It's not us.
Not you, but but I would argue it's the most effective in spreading religious ideology, even though it's so wrong. How is that?
I had the discussion with Indy after looking for skeptical stuff on something completely different, right? And ended up finding this channel that was, atheist, whatever, where it was all pro-Israeli stuff. And it led me to thinking about how the atheist community, especially the celebrity atheist community, have they do not touch Judaism at all. Which Hitchens is the only one I think I saw ever mention it. And it was once. Right, but we've there was Dawkins got called out not that long ago and said some terrible shit. Stephen Fry, I mean, you don't see Gervais or it used to be Russell Brand was part of this. Now he's not because of reasons. He done found Jeebus. Mainly to make sure he doesn't get sexual allegations completely tied to him. But I just find it, I think clearly that community has avoided it and has been told to hey, don't touch this particular religion. And there's they've definitely talked about Islam, ad nauseum. Right? They've talked about Christianity ad nauseum, but somehow Judaism gets a pass. And I'm one for going all of the above. All of the above. And I don't even care about your little niche local religions either. They're not accurate either. Sorry. I get in my bag about it because I just find it fucking baffling why we continue to need this as a society. But I think the world is pretty marvelous enough without having magical fairy tales try to explain it myself personally. But yeah, I do find it funny how they've completely avoided the Zionist topic as far as Jewish faith is concerned,
Because I think my fear on that is because if they do mention it, then they have to admit that they're wrong.
Yeah.
And they have to essentially reform, or like not reform. But you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
they have to repent. Even with that, but like they have to account. That's the word. They have to account for what's happening in Gaza. So, and they have to account for the history that led to this,
Yeah.
which they don't want to do. So it's a form of denial that I think that's the thing that makes me the most infuriating, because the history is there. So, but you're choosing to ignore it over
It's
this
just
belief that
these are supposed to be people that are massively skeptical of this kind of stuff. That's what I don't get. Like, you know, you can see through Peter Popoff, but you can't see through Daniela Weiss. Like, you can't see, you know what I mean? Like, it's the same kind of bullshit, you know, and it's the same kind of religious manipulation. Yet somehow, like, they ignore it. It baffles me. You know, this is a person who had found Kyle Kalinske because he was secular talk. And I'm still waiting for the atheist community to, like, step up on this. And they're just not, you know, which I find funny. But anyway, any closing thoughts before we get out of here? Fairy tale fucking end time shit.
Yeah,
causing nonsense
as I said,
again.
I basically believe they're throwing Sebutinde under the bus because of the blowback, but I think they're fans of her, and still in terms of what she did. And again, as I think if she's getting blowback from in Uganda, it's from the youth, who are probably more wired to what's happening. Yeah, and I'm always saying that because when it came to George Floyd, like, they were my Ugandan family who were young were the first people, even before y'all kind of checked in on me. It was them who came to me first and asked me, "Are you okay, uncle?" I was like, "Yeah." And I asked them, "How did you know?" And they said, "Oh, we saw online." So my guess is Ugandan youth are seeing what we see and are sickened by it, versus the older generation. And I will argue the older generation will be more into religion in that way, are probably either they are not fully aware because they're probably not as online as much, or they kind of align with what September thinks, especially if they are in the church. And
you could outlaw religion and most of these sex crimes would disappear in a couple of generations, but we don't have time for rational solutions.
Yeah.
So that's where I believe the dissent is coming from, but I don't think it's like an overwhelming outrage in the country in general. So I do want to kind of preface with that nuance there. Again, I could be wrong, but I would guess I'm probably more on the, you know, given what I saw and experienced when I was living there.
Yeah.
But talking about stories like these are why we are demonetized. So if you want to support us financially in order to keep the lights on the network and on the show, if you have a smartphone, if you're not using it right now to watch us, you can scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can type in the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of your screen to donate. Or if you're in the YouTube chat, you can type in !donate all one word, and the link will pop up and you can donate right there directly. You can also donate via PayPal, Cash App, and Substack if you want to give there as well. All those links to those donation links are in the description below. And like we always say, we know that times are tough and we don't expect your money. Just being here is gift enough. But if you want to support us in order to help us grow, the best way and the free way to do that is by liking, subbing, and sharing our content. And let us know in the comments what you think. Do you believe that Uganda is really disowning Sebutinde, or is she really just kind of in her fifis, just in terms of, you know, some of the blowback that she's getting from her countrymen, even though I personally believe it's not as widespread as this article or what she is making it out to be. And what's your opinion as far as Christian Zionism, I would argue in a lot of ways has influenced what's happening in Gaza? Let us know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.
Dope. Well, I saw some people filing into chat. Where is my chat at? Here it is. I saw someone saying, Bible people stop, which I find funny. So what else we got?
I saw
Abby do statistics.
Oh, by the way,
missionary Pethrito issues. Agreed. Plenty of that. You were saying?
Abby do pray to you is off the chain right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially them saying to children that slavery was no big deal. I'm like,
okay.
I would love pray to you. And I said this on Twitter. I would love them to say the Holocaust was not a big deal and see the kind of reaction that they would get.
Yeah, they probably would. Give them a week,
No, they never will. No, they never will.
They'll be like, they'll model it. They'll model the new one after the old one and be like, see, it worked out great.
Oh, by the way, Sauter's, I hate saying it this way, but Black friend is Marshall.
Yeah.
Kozlov.
Marshall Kozlov.
Yeah.
I think he's still doing shit over there with them. But
I think so, but I haven't heard of their podcast in a minute. So that's why I was kind of wondering if they even still do the show together.
It's just funny that those motherfuckers have whitewashed themselves with the Palestinian issue, when in reality they were working with people who actively worked with Israel to AstroTurf, got caught on camera. Anyway.
Yeah.
So let's get to our last one just for time, and then we'll chat with all the lovely people. But I wanted to go through, we've done a few, this didn't start with October 7th segments, and I figured this would fit well with those, but it also gave me an opportunity to make this lovely graphic. But this is from If America's No, right? Their Israel-Palestine news thing that they made recently. But they write, Israel has always used foods as a weapon against Palestinians, right? This is Muhammad Shahada over from the New Arab, right? So they write, as the starvation of Gaza gains increasing global attention, Israel has rushed to explain it away as an unfortunate byproduct of war or a logistical failure rather than a well-documented deliberate policy of weaponizing hunger. Israel's instrumentalization of food and water, however, did not start on October 7th, when then Defense Minister Yoav Gallant declared that no food, no water, no electricity, and no fuel would enter Gaza. That's called siege warfare. Rather, this tactic has been consistently used as a matter of state policy since Israel's creation in 1948 to collectively punish, contain, intimidate, blackmail, displace, or debilitate Palestinians. It is now being used more flagrantly as part of the genocide Israel is perpetuating in the Gaza Strip. One of the earliest examples of this was the 1948 Operation Cast Thy Bread, which we talked about, where Israelis founding militia systemically poisoned Palestinian drinking water wells in Gaza. Shout out to Vanessa Beeley, who wrote back. It was literally our first coverage from her. So, in Gaza, Accra, and other cities with typhoid, right? So they literally poisoned water with typhoid, and they admitted to this. Causes severe illnesses, drive a mass flight, and frighten Palestinians from trying to return. Since then, attacking water infrastructure has become a cornerstone of Israel's military assault on Gaza, where they have repeatedly bombed water and sewage systems or prevented fuel from reaching them, leading to their closure. During the ongoing genocide, one of Israel's first tactics was to deliberately and methodically target water infrastructure to deprive Palestinians in Gaza of access to the adequate amount of water required to survival. According to Human Rights Watch, the organization concluded this strategy accounted to an act of genocide. In the occupied West Bank, where settlers get about 4 times as much water as Palestinians, Israel's war on Palestinians' access to water even entails banning them from harvesting rainwater and deeming it an illegal act after designating raindrops property of the Israeli authorities. Israel's war on Palestinian food and water have been part and parcel of the strategy which the Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Dayan declared in 1967. Back then, Israel tried to replicate the Nakba and expel as many Palestinians as possible. When it failed to fully depopulate the territories, it turned to the alternative of perpetually caging occupied Palestinians in the most miserable conditions possible to force them to leave. As Diane put it, you shall continue to live like dogs, and whoever wishes may leave. It's possible that in 5 years, there will be 200,000 fewer people, and that's an enormous thing. In 2017, Israel's current finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, reiterated that sentiment in a manifesto where he said Palestinians must be given only 3 choices: leave, live as inferior non-citizens, or fight back and get killed. In the West Bank, Israel has sought to weaponize food against Palestinians since the 1967 occupation through various means, including confiscating agricultural land, cutting down olive trees, slaughtering livestock, preventing farmers from harvesting their produce, and other arbitrary restrictions undermining local industries. In Gaza, this weaponization of hunger has been the most flagrant since Israel's blockade in 2006, where access to food or lack thereof is literally controlled with an on and off switch in the hands of Israel. For the past 19 years, Israel has put Gaza under a brutal medieval-style siege with a clearly stated objective of economic warfare, whereby Gaza was banned from exporting anything and its imports were limited to what Israel strictly defined as humanitarian necessity. This designation was so entirely arbitrary that it shocked then U.S. Senator John Kerry when he learned in 2009 that Israel banned pasta from entering Gaza while allowing rice because it deemed only the latter to be humanitarian. Similarly, Israel banned jams, chocolate, cattle, irrigation pipe systems, spices, fabrics, fresh meat, seeds, nuts, and hundreds of other items. Israel explained the logic of the blockade in 2006 as putting Gazans on a diet, but not to make them die of hunger. Or as Israel then Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman put in 2018 to allow Gazans to merely keep their heads above water while their bodies are drowning. Israel even came up with a meticulous calorie count in 2008 that calculated the very minimum of food Gazans needed for basic survival, which it then used to determine the number of food trucks allowed to enter, which we've covered before. It took the Mavi Marmara massacre and the international outrage that followed for Israel to slightly loosen its draconian siege and, for instance, allow processed hummus to enter Gaza in 2011. I bet it was Sabra hummus that Israel got money from. The engineering of hunger in Gaza was so thorough that it extended to preventing Gazans from growing or sourcing their own food internally. For instance, before the 7th of October, Israel would regularly spray herbicides on Gaza's most fertile lands, leading to massive crop failure. Israel would also kill and maim farmers who try to approach their lands to cultivate produce. Tanks would regularly cross into Gaza to destroy strawberry farms, while Israel used to close down Gaza's fishing zone and ban the entry of fishing nets, fishing boats, and equipment, and regularly shot at or detained fishermen. This weaponization of food and water served 2 goals. First, it was used as a short-term tool of control, pressure, collective punishment, and intimidation, leading Israel's Haaretz to call it a mass obedience psychological experiment. The logic is simple. If Israel wants the government or population in Gaza to behave a certain way, Israeli authorities increase restrictions on the entry of food, fuel, water, electricity, and medicine until Gazans get back in line. For instance, during the Great March of Return, Gaza's largest nonviolent protest calling for an end to the siege, Israel would shut down border crossings and shrink Gaza's fishing zone to punish protesters. At the same time, an Israeli minister suggested parachuting food and medicines deep inside Gaza to tempt protesters away from the fence. Sound familiar? Second, Israel has been using its siege for the long-term goal of rendering Gaza unlivable and forcing Palestinians to leave. Before October 7th, about 10% of Gaza's population had left between 2007 and 2022. Israel admitted in 2019 that it was actively encouraging Palestinian immigration from Gaza. Even when Hamas maintained calm in Gaza and satisfied Israel's demands for security in return for easing the siege, Israel's defense minister Benny Gantz declared in 2021 that we will not allow real long-term economic development in the Strip. Israel's weaponization of starvation against Palestinians is coupled with the strategy of keeping the occupied territory fully dependent on Israel to enable the latter to have ultimate power over hunger and survival. It also renders Palestinians a money-making cash cow for the Israeli economy, whereby Israel makes large profits for being the main exporter to Gaza and the West Bank. As I was mentioning, nearly 60% of all Palestinian imports are from Israel. In 2019, the Palestinian Authority attempted to increase its independence from the Israeli economy. The PA first tried to import 5,000 cows from neighboring Arab countries instead of Israeli livestock, as Palestinians imported 120,000 head of cattle monthly from Israeli traders. The Israeli government immediately responded by detaining the cows, blocking Palestinian agricultural exports via Jordan, and threatening to impose more sanctions until the PA backed down and agreed to resume its full dependence on Israeli beef. Even when a group of young Palestinian entrepreneurs in Jericho tried to cultivate mushrooms in 2013 as an alternative source of protein and succeeded in 2018 to dominate 50% of the market in the West Bank, Israel immediately went on the offensive. Israeli authorities began squeezing the mushroom growers into smaller land, sabotaging deliveries of mushroom spawn and compost to their company, letting deliveries go rotten in Israeli ports, and then charging the Palestinian companies insane port fines to force it into debt and out of the market. The company, Amoro Farm, disappeared the same year. What Israel has done and continues to do is not merely the denial of food and water, it is the calculated deprivation of dignity, autonomy, and life itself. Famine in Gaza is not about failed logistics or the collateral hardships of war. It is the culmination of a long, cold, bureaucratic management of Palestinian suffering, engineered through policies that reduce human beings to numbers on a calorie chart and mouths that can be silenced by starvation. Behind every closed border crossing and every bombed water pipeline is not just a strategy of war, but a philosophy of domination. To subdue a people not only by force, but by hunger, not only by bullets, but by deprivation, not only by occupation, but by the erasure of the very means to live. To the end, food and water have always been instruments of power that Israel has wielded with cruelty so systemic it has become mundane to those enforcing it and unspeakable to those enduring it. So this just is more of the same, right? So Israel assaults on Palestine's only national seed bank, right? And I should have brought the one on that Eva covered a long time ago, of bombing fish farms, right? Which was way before October 7th. But Friends of Earth International strongly condemns the military assault on a seed bank in the West Bank. The multiplication unit of the Union of Agricultural Work Committee, seed bank in Hebron, is the only national seed bank in Palestine. We stand in international solidarity with Palestinian farmers and their right to food sovereignty. On Thursday, the Israeli occupation forces used bulldozers and heavy machinery to demolish storage facilities and infrastructure that are essential to the unit's operation. The destruction of critical facilities used for storing agriculture materials, seeds, and tools constitute a direct assault on Palestinian food sovereignty in the efforts of the farmers to preserve baladi, which is heirloom seeds, right? The attack on the seed bank is an attack on the local wisdom, ecological heritage, and the work by farmers to reproduce, preserve, and improve local seeds. So, again, more of the same, right? So, here's Euromed Monitor talking about just aid drops, right, which were mentioned a minute ago. But from 26th of July to the 11th, 17 days, Israel was supported from other countries and dropped only 1,218 aid packages into Gaza. Gaza's actual need is around 600 trucks of aid every single day to stop famine and begin recovery. Over 17 days, that equals 10,200 trucks. Since one truckload equals 30 airdrop packages, Gaza requires about 18,000 packages each day. The 1,200 packages dropped in that period equal just 40.6 truckloads in total, or an average of only 2.4 trucks per day, a mere 0.4% of what is actually needed. At this rate, it would take 250 days of airdrops to deliver the same amount of aid Gaza requires in a single day. So, nice little graphic they, made to illustrate this. But, yeah, so, and at least 26 Palestinians have been killed in wrong airdrops. So, 100 times more costly than trucks. Again, it's trucks have been waiting with aid, so we know how this works. Right, Euromed Monitor's team on the ground in Gaza has documented the number of aid airdrops since 26, using both field observations and Israeli official statements. The findings show that these airdrops are far from sufficient to halt the ongoing starvation. But, and meanwhile, while they try to get aid at one of the GHF sites, right, this is what they're met with. This is literally a post from an Israeli soldier on Instagram, right? This is what they see, fish in a barrel to shoot at. So, despicable. I brought this, right? This is from Aska Durrani, who is a pediatric doctor, board member of Doctors Without Borders, right? But she writes, when I entered Gaza, the Israeli military had a rule. I was only allowed to bring in 3 kilos of food. As I was weighing out protein bars, trying to get under the limit, I said to my husband, how sinister is this? I'm a humanitarian aid worker. Why would there even be a limit on food? I've worked in many places with extreme hunger, but what's so jarring in this context is how cruel it is. How deliberate. I was in Gaza for 2 months. There's no way to describe the horror of what's happening. And I say this as a pediatric ICU doctor who sees children die as part of my work. Among our own staff, we have doctors and nurses who are trying to treat patients while hungry and exhausted. They're living in tents. Some of them have lost 15, 20 members of their family. In the hospital, there are kids maimed by airstrikes, missing arms, missing legs, third-degree burns. Often there's not enough pain medication, but the children are not screaming about the pain. They're screaming, I'm hungry. I hate to only focus on the kids because nobody should be starving, but the kids, it just haunts you in a different way. When my 2 months were finished, I didn't want to leave. It's a feeling I haven't experienced in nearly 20 years of humanitarian assignments, but I felt ashamed to leave my Palestinian colleagues who are some of the most beautiful and compassionate people that I've ever met. I was ashamed as an American, as a human being, that we've been unable to stop something that is so clearly a genocide. I remember when our bus pulled out of the buffer zone, out the window on one side, I could see Rafah, which was nothing but rubble. On the other side was lush green Israel. When we exited the gate, the first thing I saw was a group of Israeli soldiers sitting at a table eating lunch. I've never felt so nauseous seeing a table full of food. strong words, but any thoughts? I mean, other than what we've all fucking yelled about ad nauseum, you know?
Yeah, I mean, what more? We like, if you don't want to know what I've said, you can go back to our old clips.
Yeah.
But and again, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Like the trend right now, especially among our governmental leaders, is to kind of liberalize the idea of, oh, all we have to do is get food in, and everything will be okay. First of all, no, it won't, because it's pretty much too late for them to get food at this point. Number one. Number two, just giving them food is not going to solve the problem, especially given you can give them the food and they might get fed for a day, only for the possibility of them being unalived the next day.
Yeah.
So getting food in the strip in of itself is not going to solve the issue. And that's what I've been noticing, is that especially the ones like Richie Torres, who's been saying, I'm pro-Israel, and now I'm pro-Israel, and now his son now saying, oh, we need to get food in. We need to get aid in. It's very disingenuous. And it's like, no, that's not the issue in of itself. That's just the low.
Symptom.
That's right. But that's the floor. Like the real issue, which no one's really talking about, is Zionism, as we kind of discussed in the last segment. But the middle ground really from those two things is putting an end to the genocide, which nobody on either side is necessarily really saying, barring from a few people, and even then that's cool. So yeah, it's the idea that you can liberalize genocide to the point of it just being amounted to they're not eating is really sick.
Yeah, it's a humanitarian crisis. No, it's a fucking genocide that has been happening for decades now.
And the reason why they're kind of keeping it to that level is if they admit it's a genocide, the US has a responsibility to do something. And because they're so bought, they're not willing to do that. So essentially, our government leaders are basically sucking the balls of our corporations and donors and an Israeli lobby versus doing the moral thing in ensuring that a people group under our power is being eradicated, to do whatever you can to ensure, their future at this point, which is very bleak right now. So it's just the weaponization of a life, of a human thing as far as food is really gross. And don't let your liberal friends tell you, give you that talking point and just be like, yeah, that's all they need to do. No, again, that's the floor. There's more that needs to be done, but again, the idea of calling it a genocide means that we have to take action. So yeah, it's just a question of whether ever they're going to do it is what is the most concerning. Hi, puppy.
Puppers. Well, talking about that sort of stuff is most likely why we're demonetized. So you can scan that QR code on your screen, go to ko-fi.com/IndieNewsNetwork and give us a few dollary dues. If not, just like and subscribe, share the video, leave a comment, let us know how cute the pupper was. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Cool. We did it. That's our show.
We did it.
Pupper's ready. Pupper ready for it to be over. Ready? You go outside? Yeah, Can you go wait? Huh? Can you go lay down for a bit? I'll be right there. I promise. I'll be right there, I promise. I'll be right there, I promise. Okay. Well, what's coming up next week? Sunday will be, me and Indy, as always. I don't know if Oz is doing stuff Saturday, but that's a thing. Thursday and Friday, we got Jesse's rerun on Friday, probably. So, but follow the Twitters and the Substacks at Get Any News, and Substack should be at the Linktree in the description below for updates and whatnot. But anything else? I think that's it, right?
Nope. I think that's it for tonight. Thank you guys for being here. So we have it.
Collin, internet, work. You're back, I think.
There we go. No, the internet is fine. I think it's just freezing. I think it might be Discord. So we still have some clips from our interview with Dwayne Omomwale that we're putting out. So
yeah, go watch those. So you're here. I promise. I promise you're here.
Okay.
Can you hear you?
All right. So we still have clips that we're going to be putting out for the next few days in addition to these. So keep a lookout for that. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah. As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week, everyone.
Go.
There's a difference between peace and liberation, is there not? You can have injustice and have peace. Isn't that correct? Peace and be enslaved.
Yes.
So peace isn't the answer.
No.
Bye, have a great time. Liberation is the answer.